It's night outside. On the bridge, a guy looks at his phone, reading a message from Jin Woo's father. It says that he is afraid for his life after visiting a traditional Korean medicine clinic. It seems many infected people go to this. He thinks it is because of the current situation with coronavirus. In the comments, a man wrote that he recently went there. Another user wrote that in his opinion they had not resolved the issue with coronavirus. The guy laughed. He looked exhausted and wondered, is this why he became a doctor of traditional Korean medicine? I still can't wrap my head around the fact that his business collapsed 3 years after opening. He wondered why the coronavirus started when he opened his clinic. He stood with a bottle of alcohol on the bridge and shouted, asking why people continue to get infected by visiting this. Why do they leave comments like his clinic is to blame for their illness? He didn't want this to happen. Suddenly his feet slipped, and in an instant he was already flying headfirst from the bridge, wondering, is the sky under his feet? The guy fell into the water and thought that this time he could not even imagine that after an ordinary doctor of traditional Korean medicine, he would become a divine healer in the world of the novel. The system window notified that a health point system has been created. He can receive health points from his internal organs through treatment. By spending the received health points, he can unlock various abilities or summon creatures. Currently, there are 0 health points. The main character thought, wondering where he is. Some kind of male silhouette loomed over him, and he thought, asking himself, who is this man? A rescuer. He probably pulled him out of the Han River. Okay, since he's still alive, we can start all over again. The main character stood up and thought that life with debts is better than death. He grabbed the blanket with a trembling hand and said that next time he would be more careful. He was in a luxurious large room and thought that he was not in a hospital. He looked around and wondered what it was. Some strange furniture, as if I was on a medieval-style film set. There was a large window in the room. There were antique decanters on the bedside table. Suddenly a voice shouted, "His Highness." The man asked with tears in his eyes, "Can he see him?" The main character thought that he scared him and wondered who this eccentric foreigner is. Is he crying? The main character hesitated and said hello and asked who he was. The man with doubt in his voice said that he should not say that he did not recognize him. Then he exclaimed that even so, he would continue to serve him. His name is Pirate Garden, and he is his personal doctor. The main character thought about it, asking what he was talking about. He asked if the man could bring him some water. He handed him a glass with lightning speed with the words for the main character to hold, and the main character exclaimed how fast. He took a closer look at the glass and wondered, wait a minute, are these real diamonds? It doesn't look like gilding. It smells like 24-karat gold. He took a sip from the glass and suddenly noticed his reflection in the mirror. A blue-eyed young guy with white hair looked at him. He spat out water in surprise. Garden exclaimed, "His Majesty," and began to wipe his face from the water with concern. While the main character looked in the mirror and wondered if it was him, but the face was not his. Suddenly it dawned on him. He silently opened his mouth and said, "Rachel Adria Magentano." He read this novel the day before he got drunk. Whose character does he see from this novel? The main character turned to Garden, who asked, "What is it?" "His Highness." The main character asked to hit him in the face. The man exclaimed in fear, "It seems that he misheard." The main character said that he could handle it himself and raised his hand to his face. The man exclaimed, "His Highness." The main character hit himself on the cheek and writhed in pain. Garden asked if he was okay. The main character thought that this was not a dream, and he happily asked the crown prince from the novel Rachel, right? It turns out that there is a mountain of debts and interest that accumulated after the failure of the business. He finally lives without ruining debts. He assumed the pose of a winner, but felt something and began to fall. He fell on the bed. The man caught him and Rachel asked what happened to him. He looked at his trembling hand and thought that he felt weakness throughout his whole body. In principle, it was much weaker than the body of a 40-year-old man. He thought, oh well, in the first half of the novel, the demonic sword emperor, Crown Prince Rachel, a minor character, appeared briefly. He was bedridden from his youth, and died at the age of 22. Did he ask Garden? The man asked again, "Yes, His Highness?" Rachel asked how old he was this year. The man replied that it was 21, which clearly horrified the prince. He cursed and bit his lip, thinking, 1 year? Where did he take a wrong turn? At what point did he suddenly become a minor character in the novel? He expected to finally forget about debts and live in comfort, enjoying every moment, since he was lucky enough to become the Crown Prince, but he only has a year to do everything. The Crown Prince was surely receiving the best medical treatment in this world. He thought that since the medicine did not work, he had been blessed by the priest countless times. And yet he died in the first half of the story, unable to overcome the disease. This means that there is only one way out for him. Rachel turned to the man, who answered, "Yes, His Highness." The prince said that he had to do something. Let him bring him needles. Size is not important. As long as there is as much of it as possible, he thought that he would protect his body. After a while, he sat on the bed wondering, what is the problem with this body? Arrhythmia, extrasystole, pulse meeting fish, pulse seething cauldron, and pulse snapping stone. The unraveling rope pulse, the leaking roof pulse, the swimming shrimp, the pecking sparrow are also known as the 9 strange pulses. He said, looking at his hand, that if the symptoms of one of these appeared on him, he would already be full of internal injuries. What a difficult life. Suddenly the door opened, Garden came in, out of breath, and said that as His Majesty had asked, he brought all the needles that he could find. He was holding a bag in his hands. Rachel pointed his finger to the side and said that this is great. Let him put it there, please. Various needles lay on a towel in front of him. He thought for a moment, reached out to one needle and took it, thinking that it was too thick. The man asked His Majesty what he intended to do about it. Rachel asked again, with needles? Well, he will poke his body with it little by little. The man rushed towards him and grabbed him by the legs, exclaiming, His Highness, let him not harm himself. He asks him to calm down. He is the one who will inherit the imperial throne. He understands that he has to cope with the disease with great pain, but there is no need to mutilate himself. Rachel said that this is enough. This is not what he thinks about. He does this with the best intentions. Rachel brought the needle to the candle and began to heat it, saying that if after the first time nothing happens to his body, he wants Garden to trust him from now on. The man looked at him, then turned away and bowed and said that if he insisted, he would believe him. Rachel began to take off his shirt, telling him not to worry too much. He won't regret it. The first needle would be on the most important respiratory organ. He lay down on the bed and thought that before moving on, it was important to normalize his breathing. To do this, start from the first point with 12 meridians, which are connected to the lungs through the pulmonary meridian of the tan hand. He took one needle and stuck it into his arm and thought, I wonder if it hurts because the needle is thick. The first acupuncture point of the lungs, the cloud gate, is located on the lateral branch of the brachial plexus. He started sweating and thought it was ready. Something appeared in front of him. Rachel opened his eyes questioningly. The system window notified that his body had responded positively to his ability to heal with acupuncture, and his internal organs were functioning much better. His lungs began to function again. The lungs received 100 health points. The 2 lungs danced and showed thumbs up in approval. Rachel looked at it and asked again, What are these mascots for? Garden asked worriedly, His Highness. He watched as Rachel waved her hands in the air and asked, Is this some kind of status window? The man covered his mouth with his hands. There were tears in his eyes. He thought that their crazy crown prince was very pathetic, and how could he be helped? Rachel called Garden. The man responded, and he said that he was not mad. Let him not exaggerate. The man asked if he was going to stick more needles into himself. Rachel replied that there was nothing to worry about and stuck another needle. The system notified that he had unerringly hit the cloud gate point. The squeezing feeling in his chest softened a little. Rachel shuddered and said that it hurt him. It hurt more than he expected. Garden said, My God. He asks to look after the crown prince of the Imperial Magentano family and cure his madness as soon as possible. Their prince can no longer remain sick because of this. His state of mind is suffering. He is harming himself. His poor nerves will give out. The man prayed on his knees. Rachel looked at him with a silent expression. He turned and thought that he needed to finish what he started. The first point is the white guard, then the heavenly storage after, the smallest hole, and the meeting of the fish. The system informed that thanks to his skillful acupuncture treatment, the various points involved in the massage are stimulated. His lungs feel as if they are being massaged in a massage chair. Rachel wondered, what other massage chair? And why didn't he get health points? And finally, the quagmire point of the elbow cavity. He stuck a needle into his finger, and the system notified that the acupuncture treatment of the left lung meridian was successfully completed. His lungs are tap dancing. Rachel wondered what. They were spinning around dancing. The guy with the pigtail woke up from the noise, saying how much fun they had. The system wrote that the organ responsible for bowel movements synchronized with the tap dancing lungs and woke up. The organ came on stage and asked what they were doing and why they started without him. They all started dancing, and the system wrote that his colon was in rhythm and was showing an impressive wave of movement. The colon gave him 100 health points. Rachel asked in surprise, "What is this doing?" The system notified. The colon gave him 100 health points. His lungs gave him 200 health points, a total of 600. Now even the colon works as it should, and the system also wrote that the number of health points has reached the level at which abilities are unlocked. The abilities available to unlock depend on his current knowledge and skills. Does he want to see the list of possible abilities to unlock? Rachel asked again. Abilities. Like in games where swinging a sword releases its aura or a staff shoots fire after casting a spell. Are classic abilities found in the fantasy genre? Of course yes. He pressed his finger on the icon. The system asked him to familiarize himself with the list of possible abilities to unlock: measuring the pulse, acupuncture, bloodletting, cauterization, preparing herbal infusions, recognizing herbs, searching for herbs, brewing medicinal infusions, requesting payment for medical treatment, the main technique of Astrakhan. He laughed and said that these were all the techniques he used in his work. Any treatment begins with a diagnosis. Only a clear diagnosis will allow the correct treatment and medications to be prescribed. He clicked on measuring the pulse. The system notified that the ability was unlocked. Level 1, cost 500 health points, remaining health points 100. His knowledge and experience unlocked the ability. Having learned to feel the target's pulse, he will be able to approximately assess the state of health and get the results by reading the full report on medical examination. Rachel wondered, full medical report? You need to take your pulse. He put 2 fingers to his hand. The system wrote that heart rate measurement begins. Scanning, 5%, 45%, 85%, 100%. Full medical examination report. Target Rachel Adria Magentano. Race human. Gender male. Age 21. Height 176 centimeters. Weight 53 kilograms. Blood type first positive. The overall rating of the 5 storage organs is F. The overall rating of the 6 palace organs is F. The overall conclusion is SS rank reject. Life expectancy is 91 days. Rachel covered her face with her hands and thought that she had imagined something like this, but not for 3 months. The mobile contract lasts longer too. He asked himself, will he just die like that? If you insert the needles clockwise, rotating using the method of increasing-decrease, and while exhaling, take it out using the method of breathing, adding, and draining. He said that this was the last thing to do and pulled the needle out of his finger. The system notified that life expectancy has increased by 1 day. Now it is 92. Rachel jumped up and asked, has his life expectancy increased? So it worked. He will try to repeat the same thing on the other side. He stuck the needles in the same way as he did on the other hand and exclaimed, here it is. Suddenly blood flowed from his mouth, and the system notified that his body was under stress due to frequent acupuncture. Based on his current condition, they recommend acupuncture once every 3 days. Rachel looked at this and said, right, acupuncture alone cannot cure everything. The patient must be strong enough to withstand the stimulation of nerves and meridians during acupuncture, and his body now, in game terms, has extremely few health points. The message he saw confirms that acupuncture is effective, but a weak body is a problem. It will take 3 days to restore strength for 1 acupuncture session. If he does this constantly, then given the increase in life expectancy per session, he will be able to increase the time allotted to him by a month. However, this is not so good, because death will still come early. A more effective method is needed. The faster and more confidently this will work, you will need consumables, or rather tonics. Garden asked again, tonics. Is His Highness sure that everything is all right with him? He looked at him and, waving his hand, said that he had a request. The man became agitated and said that he was at his service. Then Rachel asked if they had any potent ingredients in their storage room. The man asked again, are they potent? Rachel said that he meant poisonous. The man said yes, but he didn't have time to finish because Rachel exclaimed, beaming, "That means there is." And he asked, "Is there any aconite root?" Garden replied, "Yes, even if this is not the main palace. They still brought it, since his residence is already here." Rachel beamed and said, "Great, let him bring it here." The man asked in bewilderment, "Let him forgive him, but for what?" Rachel smiled slyly and said that he would eat it himself. Garden looked at him in horror. A little later, he was on his knees and begged, His Highness should not do this, asking how he could ask him to help poison himself. Rachel replied that he had no such goal. It was part of the treatment. Garden was still crying, but His Highness. Rachel told him to stop wailing and let him carry it already. He gives him 5 minutes. If he is late, he will definitely kill himself. Garden cried and said, but Rachel exhaled, thinking that he would achieve nothing. He asked, did he know that aconite root is very toxic, right? The man said, yes, His Highness. This is used in poisons. There are 2 types of aconite root. What the prince wants to eat is the smaller root known as the daughter root. The aconitine and aconite can stop the heart. Rachel said that this is true. However, he knows how to neutralize and control the poison. In other words, he can turn a poisonous plant into a medicinal herb. Garden asked, should we turn something poisonous into something medicinal? Rachel said, in another country this process is called detoxification. The man asked again, detoxification? Rahel added that after this, the toxic properties of the daughter root will become medicinal and asked if he convinced him. Garden said that, to be honest, not really. He had never heard of this before. He didn't know who told him this and whether he could believe it. However, if the named remedy helps him improve his health, he will fulfill the order and bring aconite. Rachel remained silent. A little later, Garden walked along the corridor at night, holding a candle in his hand. He thought that His Highness's body was weakening every day. They were in despair since no medicine was helping. He came to the storage room. Detoxification can be tried. He bent over to the cabinet shelf and thought that in return, when the cooking was finished, he would be the first to try the result to make sure it was safe. Rachel looked joyfully at the pan with the bubbling liquid. The pan stood on the stove. Garden said that the smell was very strange. Rachel covered it with a towel and asked if he still didn't believe it was safe. Garden said that he prepared it from poisonous ingredients. He clasped his hands, saying that he asked him to think it over again. Rachel thought that he was scaring him. Then he would scare him with revenge. Rachel said that if he doubts, he can try first. Garden replied that he would do this with great pleasure. Rachel was surprised and was silent. He looked at him closely and remembered that in the novel Garden was faithful and devoted. At first, he was not appointed as the family doctor. To put it bluntly, he started as an assistant to the family doctor. But the doctor who was initially full of confidence eventually left. There was only one Garden left with Rachel. That's the kind of person he is. In the end, Garden was convicted of the death of the crown prince and hanged. Rachel looked at the man's back and thought that he was sincere and deserved a good life for his loyalty. But he would not even share such a valuable thing with him. The pan was on the stove. It contained a decoction of ephedra, aconite, and hoofed grass. Rachel took the cup in his hands and said contentedly, "Ready?" Garden asked, standing next to him. "Can I drink now?" Rahul raised his index finger up and said that he understood Garden's haste. "But we must wait. This medicine must cool down before use." Garden asked again, "Cool down? By the way, how did he find out about this?" Rachel thought, Garden is faithful to Rachel. There will be problems if he realizes that he is a different person in this case, and quickly said why he knows about it. "We had to come up with something," Garden replied. "Okay, it turns out that the magician from the dream shared the knowledge with him." Garden replied that he believed him, but said it with such a face that Rachel thought it was not like that. He covered his face with his hand and said that he thought this medicine was suspicious. Rachel turned away and thought this was his chance. He reached out to the cup of extract and drank it. Garden looked at him with widened eyes, exclaiming, "What?" Rachel wiped his mouth with his hand and said that he drank it all. The man was trembling. Suddenly he felt that something was approaching. The system notified that he had consumed a perfectly prepared decoction of ephedra, aconite, and hoofed grass. The daughter root removed cold and ulcers from him and improved his metabolism. The main energy of Asrakan has awakened. Rachel asked again, "The main energy of Asrakan?" It is a technique created by the legendary Grandmaster Knight known as Javier Esrahan, and the aristocrat he served under, Lloyd Fronter. This is only passed down to the direct heirs of the Imperial Magentano family and is a symbol that since the owner of the body is the Crown Prince, he must have learned the technique in his youth. The system notified that the main energy of Asraken was unlocked. Level 1 Circle. This processes and increases the absorbed mana by circulating it around the heart. Mana increased by 120%. The required number of health points to increase the level is 1,000. The current number of points is 100. He thought that it felt like his heart was surrounded by a slippery donut. He felt how with every breath his body was filled with vital energy. Rachel looked at himself and said, "This is mana." He smiled and thought that this was very good. Suddenly he felt one heartbeat. The plate fell to the floor and broke. He grabbed it and thought his heart was going to burst. Rachel began to breathe heavily and bent over and fell to his knees, trembling. Garden exclaimed, "His Highness!" He shouted something, but Rachel did not understand him. The system notified, "Attention! The circle of mana is putting too much pressure on his heart. Danger! The balance of the development of the mana circle and its heart is disrupted. Be careful, his heart may stop." He shook in thought, asking himself, "Is the balance of development upset? Does this mean that the size of the heart does not fit the size of the circle?" Rahul has been sick since childhood and has never trained the circle of mana. It is like a too small ring squeezing his heart. If so, then there is a way out. Only once you cannot reduce the heart. It will increase the circle itself. We need to speed up the rotation for this to take off to its fullest. Damn it, he really feels like he might die. But this pain is incomparable to his failures in Korea. Due to rumors that his clinic was infested with coronavirus patients, he lost all his patients and even began to go bald. On top of the rent, debts and interest continued to accumulate. He worsened his living conditions to try to pay everything off. Rachel screamed, "His house is gone." He asked not to underestimate him and grabbed the light circle, stretching it with all his might. He shouted, "A self-employed business owner in Korea." He caught his breath. The system spoke. Thanks to the successful king of the internal organs, the heart completely awakened. There were herbs on the board. Rachel fell on the floor. Garden asked him if he was okay. Rachel began to breathe heavily. A system window appeared in front of him, which said that thanks to successful stimulation, the king of internal organs, the heart, had fully awakened. The king has arrived. 4 men carried a palanquin. The doors opened and the king came out. He was all shining. It was Rachel's heart. The young guy said that he was glad that he was healthy. The lungs replied that a wretched creature had come to a wretched place. He greeted them. Rahul said that he would be him. Let them forgive him for having such a weak body. He clenched his fist and looked at the system window, where it was said that the balance of growth between the mana circle and his heart had been equalized. For the first time in his life, he had acquired a mana circle slot. Rachel wondered, is there a slot like in the game for items? Maybe Garden looked at him. Rachel asked, right? Garden thought that he suddenly began to look as if he was full of vital energy. He asked if he was in a lot of pain. Was this a side effect of that decoction? Rachel said that he simply choked on the phlegm, which blocked his breathing. He grabbed his throat and the man shouted at him not to do this, because he had already suffered enough. He should have drunk it first. Rachel asked if he really wanted to try it. Next time he will give an opportunity. The man said that that's not what he was talking about. Rachel said that then he should clean up here, but he needs to rest, and he also thanked him. The man was incredibly surprised. Rachel said, didn't hear, and okay. If he understood correctly, then he got something incredible. A mana slot is a place that collects ingredients mixed with mana. Each slot holds 10 liters. He can collect what he consumes while eating. He went into the kitchen and wondered if there was anything to eat here. Rachel looked at the jug of water. The water would be perfect for such an experiment. There should be about 2 liters. He thought that the average lethal dose is an indicator of the toxicity of a substance and the dose that causes the death of half of the members of the test group. To put it simply, the chance of dying from this is 50%. Otherwise, a person will either suffer from pain or become a vegetable. That is, with an average weight of 60 kilograms, the average lethal dose of water is 5.4 liters. For its weight, this value is 3.9 liters. He picked up the decanter and exclaimed, trembling, "This body is heavy. He drank the water and thought that he wanted to save the water he was now drinking. The system window showed that his slot was one of 10 liters. Rahil said that it worked, but he did not feel at all that he was drunk. He would try again. 4 empty decanters stood on the table. He drank 10 liters but didn't feel anything. Allocate 100 milliliters. He, like the human version of a camel, can only secrete as much water as he wants. The Crown Prince has figured out how to use it and now wants to try out the tonic soup. Rachel wondered where to put the water then. He will die instantly if he drinks 9 liters of water. Rachel folded her arms across her chest and wondered, is there no way out? He exclaimed what he came up with. Asrakin's core energy technique specializes in absorbing, enhancing, and removing mana. He will take advantage of the absorption and removal and remove water from the body, not into the body. Absorbing mana and removing it, a pool of mana appeared in his hand. He said that it worked. Now he will just slowly put everything into the decanter. Rachel spoke slowly and directed the stream towards the container. As soon as the mana reached it, the decanter broke into pieces. Rachel looked at it and exhaled heavily, asking what happened. Water flowed onto the floor from a broken jug. It shouldn't have been like that. He thought it would pour out like water from a tap, but in fact it turned out to be a water cannon. Suddenly there was a clatter of footsteps. The guards shouted that a loud noise came from the Crown Prince's chambers. They opened the doors and shouted, His Highness. He is okay. He was attacked. Who dared? Rachel replied, nothing like that. He wondered what story he should tell them. He put his hand behind his head and said that he got a little angry and broke the decanter on the table, and they heard this noise. The men looked at each other. He thought asking himself what didn't work. And it really sounded stupid. The guard bowed and said, everything is fine, His Highness, and asked if he was hurt. Rachel replied that he only slightly scratched his leg and thought, did he believe it? The guard turned to Garden and asked to take His Highness to the second chambers. The man replied, okay, but first he will treat the wound. Rachel thought, sitting on Garden's back, that they fell for his suspicious excuse because he was the Crown Prince. In the second chamber, he was lying on the bed and the man said that he should rest properly, bowing. Rachel wondered, is this one of the advantages of the imperial family? He said, let Garden rest too. He looked at his hand, lying on the bed and said, by the way, what just happened from the circle along the meridian from his heart? A flow of mana went through his hand, bringing out what was absorbed. As a result, there was a burst of energy. Rahul put his hands behind his head and thought, he should sleep before he does something again. He should be more careful with experiments. No one can even imagine what he was up to. Rachel fell asleep. In the palace, a man sitting on the throne asked, he says Rachel has been acting strange lately. It was Emperor Estelian Testaros Magentano. The man bowed before him and said, yes, His Majesty the Crown Prince pricks himself with needles and drinks poison. The emperor got angry and asked Rachel, what is he doing? The next morning, Rachel and Garden stood in the kitchen at the table. The Crown Prince said, well, he prepared 10 liters of decoction of ephedra, aconite, and hoofed grass. He asked if the man could come out for a minute. Garden asked again, what, why? Rachel smiled and thought that he would lose consciousness if he saw him drink everything in one gulp. He said that just for a moment he needed to do something alone. The man narrowed his eyes and asked if he was going to drink it again. But His Highness, wasn't he in pain after the previous time? Rachel replied that he simply choked. The man replied that he was uneasy because he had made a lot of broth. Rahul replied that this was necessary for the experiment. He would drink a little. He didn't want to refuse since he tried so hard when searching for ingredients. Garden scratched his head and asked again, is it true? Rahul replied that, of course, he couldn't drink it all. Garden said, only a crazy person would dare to do that. They both laughed. Rachel stopped laughing and stared at the man. He was already laughing alone. Then he pushed him out the door. Garden looked at him questioningly. Rachel exhaled, took the pan with the elixir, said that it was heavy. He brought it to his mouth and drank. Filling the slot with 10 of 10 liters, he put the pan on the table. It was excellent. Now all that remains is to gradually release it into the body. He walked along the corridor. The system notified 0. 1 liters of decoction and ephedra of aconite and the hooves were removed. While he was sitting in the toilet, the system notified that 0. 1 liters of decoction of ephedra, aconite, and hoofed grass had been removed. Rachel woke up in his bed and the system notified that another 0. 1 liter of decoction of ephedra, aconite, and hoofed grass had been removed. His heart liked it. It gave him 100 health points. His lungs dance and give him 200 health points. His colon jumps with the sphincter and gives him 100 health points. A total of 500 health points. Rachel bit his finger and thought that this was not enough. He needed to increase his life expectancy. The system constantly notified him that the decoction was being removed. Rachel's heart lay on the bed and asked her colon, "What's on the menu today?" He said, "A decoction of ephedra, aconite, and hoofed grass." The heart asked, "What about tomorrow morning?" The guy replied, "Also, it seems there will be broth for dinner tomorrow too." The heart rose up on the bed and said that the rectum should lie on the ground. The system notified that his internal organs were hurting from a decoction of ephedra, aconite, and hoofed grass. Rachel thought that they should just drink what they give. He was having lunch when a system window appeared, which notified that life expectancy had been increased by 50 days, for a total of 133 days. He jumped up from the table and said it worked. The maid who was standing nearby got scared and dropped the cup on the floor. Rachel apologized for scaring her. The girl bowed in horror and asked for forgiveness for scaring him. He wondered why she was apologizing for breaking the cup. He said that everything was fine and asked if she was hurt. The girl got scared and said that she was sorry. She wouldn't do that again and asked not to beat her like last time. He asked again whether to beat her. Had he beaten her before? And I thought, almost crying, let her say no. The girl said, "No, His Majesty did not beat him personally." He was horrified by these words. And he asked, he ordered someone else to do it. For what? The girl said that a drop of water fell on his sleeve when she poured it. Rachel wondered if the crown prince was a monster. He sat down on the bed and told her to just clean up and leave. The girl was delighted, thanked him and ran out the door. He thought that she looked like she managed to escape from prison. He called Garden. The man immediately appeared next to him and asked, "Yes, His Highness." He said that lately his memories seemed to be in a fog. Let him tell how he used to treat him and the servants. The man started to speak, but Rachel said that if he starts to flatter, he will drink all the poison that is in front of him. The man was horrified. Garden said that there was no choice and said that Rachel usually beat the servants. He exclaimed, "Crown Prince, what was he even doing?" Now it's clear why the guard and Garden believed his stupid excuse. He's just a madman who shouldn't be messed with. Rachel turned his head and asked, "But why isn't Garden afraid of him?" As the closest person, he probably suffered more than others. The man said that he believed him. Rachel asked again, does she believe him? Garden replied that he knew what he really was like. He remembered when he was younger, he was running in the rain, looking for the prince, and saw a boy sitting alone under a tree. He was holding a small chick in his hands. Then Garden smiled looking at it. He put his hand to his chest and said that he believed that after the Curie, His Highness would become himself, and recently his faith was justified. Rachel stood up and asked, "Does he like how he has changed?" The man exclaimed, "Of course." Rachel replied that this was good and that he could eat sweets as a reward. The man wanted to object, but Rachel told him to just eat it. He is Lycon. That is, Rachel swears on his name that he will not have to pay with his life for his death. He will survive. The door opened and a guard came running, shouting, "His Highness, His Majesty is calling him to him." Rachel was surprised to hear this. The weather was clear. Rachel entered the palace in full dress. He appeared before the emperor and introduced himself, saying that he expressed his respect to him, the true ruler of these lands. The emperor became thoughtful. He looked at the crown prince and wondered, Asrahan energy technique? This weakling owns it. He noticed the prince's trembling, thinking that he was nervous in his presence. Perhaps he was mistaken about him. Rachel thought that his leg was numb. Let the emperor quickly say something so that he could get up. The man asked if he was satisfied with life in his own palace. Rachel answered, "Yes, His Majesty," and thought that he would seriously talk to him while he was on his knee. The emperor said that he was told that Rachel stabbed himself with needles and drank poison. Is that so? The prince answered, "No at all." The man asked, did he really forget that he was the heir to the imperial family? He is an honorary member of their bloodline, so let him not lose his dignity. Rachel remained silent. The emperor asked that if he does not have enough strength to withstand the weight of the crown because of his health, then wouldn't it be better to make a wise decision? Rachel raised his head and thought, asking himself, is this a wise decision? Well, he had an ulterior motive for this meeting. The emperor said that he would not beat around the bush. He wanted him to renounce the title of crown prince in favor of his brother, the second prince. Rachel thought about it. He thought that the man meant something else and said that his majesty would forgive him. But he refuses. The man squeezed the armrest and asked displeasedly. He refuses, dares to contradict him. Rachel said exactly what he thought, that his blood pressure was high. But he shouldn't be afraid. It's obvious why he says that. He does not need his consent to be deprived of the title. The point of asking for this is for his eldest son to give it out of kindness, morality, and in recognition of his brother who is worthy of the title of crown prince. This is a rather cunning political move. Now he is weak and hopeless, but he will not give up without a fight. He is probably very angry now. The emperor asked, does he not respect his decision? He began to go downstairs and asked if the title of crown prince meant so much to him. Does he want to disgrace him and the whole family? Rachel thought that he didn't care about the title. He would happily give it to the second prince or someone else and enjoy life. But if he accepted his offer, it would be the country that would go into the abyss because of the second prince. In the novel, the second prince was considered conscientious and gifted, but in an era of chaos, he proved to be a disappointment and was ill-equipped to cope with such disorder. Under his rule, both the empire and the family would fall. He must do everything possible to prevent this from happening. Rachel began to get up and said that he was sick and weak. The king correctly noted, but intelligence and wisdom were with him. The title of crown prince was not important to him, but the well-being and peace in the family, on the contrary. The emperor replied that he said well. Then Rachel replied that these were not just beautiful words. He wanted to ask him for a favor. The emperor asked which one. Rachel asked him to give him a chance to prove that he was the best contender for the crown. A little later, at the crown prince's residence, Garden asked why his majesty had called him. Rachel replied that it was nothing. He just wanted him to transfer the title of crown prince to his brother. The man was dumbfounded. Rachel said, don't worry. He refused him, and also offered to have a duel with the second prince. He looked at Garden and asked what he was doing. The man was sitting on his knees in front of the bag and said that he was packing his things and would soon have to leave this place. Rachel exclaimed in surprise, what? Emperor Stellian, sitting at the window, grinned and said, he wants a chance to prove that he deserves his place more than his brother. Is there such a side to his personality? Okay, he'll do him a favor and wait impatiently and laugh. Meanwhile, Garden and Rachel were snatching the bag from each other's hands. Rachel said that victory was his, and Garden asked how he could win. The weather was clear over the city. Flags were flying and several men were sitting on chairs, including the emperor. The girls looked at the princes and exclaimed that Prince Theodore was very handsome and his victory would be brilliant. Rachel was warming up. His brother came up to him and said that he didn't need to do this. His name was Theodore Palermo Magentano. He was the second prince of the Magentano Empire. The guy said that he hated to say this, but he knew how it would all end. Rachel asked again, is it known that he is so confident in his victory? Theodore said that his majesty had informed him that he proposed a duel to give him more rights to the throne. He knows what the result will be. He doesn't want to jeopardize his health for this. He's against the need to sacrifice himself for it. Rachel smiled and thought, it seems they are both wrong. Let them forgive him. But he said that he did not intend to lose. Garden stood nearby holding a shield in his hands. Rachel took it. Someone in the crowd said that the crown prince was very strange. Another voice replied that he could be heard. The voice asked, doesn't he think so? The second prince has an Israhan corps with one circle and is also learning fencing from the famous knight. Garden looked at Rachel with a shield. People were still whispering, saying that the crown prince didn't have a chance. He was only good at causing pranks. Garden looked at him and remembered his words. A joke? Rachel pouted and said that he was absolutely serious and intended to win. Garden said with caution, His Highness. Rachel said that no one expects anything from him, so the pressure is minimal. Garden exclaimed that of course he believed in his victory. Rachel asked, is he lying and not blushing? If he manages to repel 3 of his blows, victory is his. Garden folded his hands in prayer and thought that he was asking that he not suffer. Emperor Stellian said that today's battle will determine who is worthy to ascend the throne. The rules are simple. If the Crown Prince lasts 5 minutes in battle or defense, then victory is his. Otherwise, the second prince will win. Let the fight begin. Theodore thought that since it had come to this, he would try to finish it quickly. When suddenly Rachel threw the sword aside, people began to discuss this, asking questions. Is it all over already? A terrible sight. Theodore looked at him and asked if he was giving up. And he thought, what a relief. It would be difficult for him to raise a sword against a sick person. But I can't even believe that he surrendered in front of everyone. It's a shame for their family. Is it worth talking to him and inspiring him to continue the fight? No, there's no need because he's sick. But his father is looking at them. Theodore didn't know what to do. Rachel intercepted the shield. Theodore wondered, did he choose to defend against a half-hearted attack? His goal is to hold out for 5 minutes, not to overpower him. A bold choice. Then he will quickly deal with him. He activated his mana and ran towards Rachel. His Majesty thought that weight, strength, and even mana were put into this attack. The shield would not withstand it. Theodore struck, and thought let his brother not fall, otherwise he will make himself look like a fool, even if he loses. Then let him do it with dignity by bending his knee, and not by falling. He deliberately started with an overhead strike. Oddly enough, Rachel was standing in front of him, and Theodore asked himself, did he just dodge? People were shocked, asking each other, what was the matter with him defending himself from the second prince's blow? She is sure the second prince spared him because of his kindness. Theodore looked at Rachel and thought that it was clear from his gaze that what happened was not luck. But that doesn't change anything. He struck the shield again and threw Rachel aside. Garden exclaimed, His Highness. Rachel thought that his head was spinning and his wrist was numb. But while working as a policeman, he didn't have to defend himself against anything. It's a trifle. He put up a shield and thought that Theodore absorbs mana more than he thought, since his idea worked even better. The second prince said that he did not know what Rachel was planning, but now he jumped up and struck with his sword. Rachel thought that for this moment he trained his lower body. This shield was custom made by the blacksmith of his palace, and an explosive mixture was also prepared for his dear brother. The system notified that the withdrawal function of slot number 1 is activated. Let him choose how much to withdraw. He brought out 0.2 liters. Theodore wondered and blushed. What is this hiccup? Rachel thought that the demonic sword emperor said it right. Theodore even gets drunk from a glass of wine. Last night, he filled the slot with an explosive cocktail consisting of 20 types of spirits just for this moment. The crown prince chuckled evilly behind the shield. Theodore said he was sure that he hit the shield, but along with the mana, something else penetrated his body. Something hit him, and he looked completely intoxicated. He thought that he needed to get his act together. The result was already a foregone conclusion. He just needed to defeat his brother in 5 minutes. Then he would receive his father's recognition, and thousands of residents of the capital would applaud him. And the place of the proud crown prince would be his. It will be better for their family, for the empire, for their brother, whose health is getting worse. Rachel looked out from behind the shield, looking at her brother with the question, did it work? Theodore spoke, that's why he will win. He took the sword tighter, swung it, and hit the shield, shouting for it to receive. Rachel wondered if he could resist the explosive cocktail. Theodore raised his sword up and struck Rachel's shield once more with such fury that the crown prince thought he needed to do it again. The system notified that 0.1 liter of explosive cocktail stored in the circle slot was withdrawn. Rachel thought, let him drink to the bottom and not regret it. Theodore was surprised when he suddenly woke up behind the bar and asked where he was. Just after he was fighting, the bartender was making a cocktail at the bar. Then he put the glass in front of the prince, saying that the gentleman over there was treating him. Theodore turned around. Rachel was sitting next to him. He raised his glass and exclaimed to his health. Theodore woke up on the battlefield, all red, and asked if he was hallucinating. Rachel threw the shield aside and thought, great, now it will help him sober up a little. He took a breath and ran towards it. The system notified that the liquid stored in the circle slot was erupting. He thought that it would hurt a little. He extended his hand, concentrating his mana, and hit him in the chest. Theodore cleared his throat and flew back. Everyone was shocked by this sight, even the emperor himself. Rachel watched this happily. Estelian wondered, is this really the Israhan core technique? He thought he had made a mistake, But despite the abundance of human energy in the air and the fact that they are far from each other, he clearly feels the response of his circle. Theodore opened his eyes. Rachel was already holding his leg. Then the prince asked in bewilderment, "Brother?" Rahul replied that he purifies polluted mana. Theodore asked, "This is the Esrahan core technique. How did he master it?" Rachel asked again, "What's wrong?" "He just matured late." Theodore said that he had lost, and Rachel asked if he really couldn't believe it. Nothing. Neither did he. Suddenly blood began to flow down his forehead. Theodore exclaimed that blood was dripping from his forehead. Rachel touched the wound with his hand and said, "It looked like he hit the shield when he blocked its blows." Theodore narrowed his eyes and thought. He gave it his all during the fight, used his body to its maximum potential, and fought with all his strength, and asked himself, how did he feel about the fight in the meantime? It seemed to him that victory was already a foregone conclusion. He was too arrogant. Rachel said, "Ready," and asked how he felt. Theodore replied that he was ashamed and squeezed his hand. Rachel looked at him worriedly and asked what he meant by his physical condition. Theodore exclaimed that he was much better. Rachel asked again, smugly, "Right?" The crown prince wondered if he could get all the alcohol out of his body. Theodore bent one knee and said that he was the second principal of Theodore Palermo Magentano, officially admitting his defeat in battle with Crown Prince Rachel in front of his father and their subjects. People exclaimed, "What?" They raised their hands up enthusiastically. Rachel raised 2 hands and shouted that he did it. Garden rubbed his eyes with a handkerchief. The crown prince was so happy. Who would have thought? Rachel thought. Finally it appeared. The system notified that for the first time he healed another person in this world. A new ability was unlocked as a reward for a great achievement. Request for payment for medical treatment level 1. His life expectancy increases when he prolongs the lives of his patients through treatment. The current conversion rate is 2,000 to 1. Rachel exclaimed, "Super." Request for payment for medical treatment level 1. The ability was activated. Patient Theodore's life expectancy was increased by half a day. The estimated increase in life expectancy is too small, and the minimum size is 1 day. Rachel looked at this and said that he had hoped in vain and thought that, be that as it may, the most important thing is that now that he is treating patients, he can increase both their and his life expectancy by a certain amount of time. Right. What a relief. No matter how much broth he drank, and no matter how many times he performed acupuncture, he could not leave the feeling that he was pouring water into a leaky vessel. He was like a toad near a broken jug, but from now on everything will change. Emperor Estelian approached him and asked why he was silent. He asked if he used the Israkan core in this battle. Rachel answered, "Yes, exactly that." Then the man asked how he mastered it. Rachel replied that he himself did not fully understand. Estelian asked again, "Did he not understand?" Rachel replied, "That's exactly what His Majesty thought. How can you tell him that he acquired the ability by stuffing himself with needles?" The emperor said that at the time of his birth, he put the core of Astrakhan into his heart with his own hands. Rachel replied that it was a great honor for him, His Majesty. The emperor added, however, due to his weak heart, he was unable to use it. Rachel said that he was sorry. The man said that at the most important moment, he managed to overcome his illness. The crown prince thanked him for his words, and the man said that because of this, all his plans and works went awry. Rachel again asked for forgiveness and thought, is he praising or reproaching? The emperor said that a promise is a promise. The fight is over. He turned away and said that he had won and, as promised, he would retain his title of crown prince. However, he would continue to watch him and check whether he could handle the burden that he would acquire along with the throne. Estelian asked, did he understand him? Rachel clenched his fist, and the man shouted asking why he wasn't answering. Rachel said, His Majesty, he heard that recently he did not draw his sword because he was busy with state affairs. He should not do that. He needs to move in order not to lose stamina and strengthen muscles, and also eat more vegetables and stop smoking. The emperor asked who he was to give him advice. The crown prince replied that he was saying this for sincere reasons. A little later, when the emperor was riding in a carriage and said, just think that he rejected his advice with hypocritical requests and had not yet answered the question about the Israkan technique. I can't even believe that he took advantage of it so thoughtlessly. Estelian asked, what if something happened to his sick body? He tapped his foot nervously and thought that the prince believed he was in despair. The boy had lost his mother at birth and was constantly ill. He hoped for something from him over and over again, but was constantly disappointed. But the glimmer of hope that appeared today again made his heart tremble. Meanwhile, Rachel was driving through the quarry to his residence and recalled that his father also had a stroke that night. He did not study, but went to have fun. When they called him and he came running, it was too late. The Emperor would also die due to a stroke. After Rachel, who dies in the first half of the demonic Sword Emperor, he will not let this happen. He needs to stay strong to protect the throne, then he can increase his lifespan with the amazing ability of requesting medical treatment fees. And I don't want to relive that situation again. Suddenly Garden, who was sitting opposite him in the carriage with tears in his eyes, shouted, "His Highness!" Rachel flinched and said that he scared him. Then the man told him to ask why he was crying now. Rachel hesitated and said, "Okay, why is he crying?" Garden replied that he was touched and how difficult and tiring it was for him. The Crown Prince moved his face away and said, "Yes, thank you for your concern. Let him rest a little. They have a lot to do from tomorrow." The man asked again, "Do they have a lot to do?" Rachel replied that he needed to meet someone. A little later they were sitting in a restaurant. Garden asked if this was not Sorrentino's garden. Rachel replied, "Yes, this is one of the 10 best restaurants in the capital." He knows this, right? Garden replied that he was a regular customer here and asked why the prince suddenly decided to change his clothes. Rachel sat with his hands folded. He was wearing a wig. There was a knock on the door. The waiter came and asked if he could take their order. Rachel said that there would be pasta with sauce, but separately, and also a salad without vegetables, and let him bring grape wine made not from grapes, and asked if he would eat before sunrise. Is it okay? The waiter told him to follow him. Rachel began to get up from the table. Garden did not understand anything. He whispered in his ear asking, "What is this order?" Rachel told him to follow and see everything for himself. They came to a secret way down. The waiter said they would have to go down. Garden wondered if there was such a place in this restaurant. How does he know about it? Rachel exhaled and thought that everything was as in the novel and exhaled. They went down the spiral staircase and Garden asked, "His Highness, what is this place and why are they here?" Rachel replied that he had come to collect some large payment for treatment. The man said, "Excuse me?" Rachel replied that he was looking for someone here and asked if he had heard of Damien. Garden answered no. Rachel said that it was not surprising. He opened the doors and they went out onto the balcony. There were 2 fighters below. The spectators were noisy. There was blood on the walls. Garden asked, "His Highness, where did they come?" Rachel replied that this was a secret place. He looked around and wondered, where is he? A strongly built man, covered in scars, stood on the field. Garden said that he looked very strong. Rachel replied that it was not him. The gates opened. Rachel said that he had finally shown himself to be the real main character of the novel, Damien. A young man with brown hair stood opposite a huge man with scars. The presenter said that if he is finished, then let him leave quickly. The fighter answered well. Then the presenter spoke, and so is their main fight today. On the one hand, Damien is a very talented swordsman. His debut took place in the Colosseum when he was 17 years old. In 3 months, he became a champion, defeating everyone and everyone. On the other hand, his opponent, a terrifying monster with fangs 3 times larger than Damien, emerged from the darkness, and the monster let out a loud roar. Rachel was horrified and thought that this was a real troll and a serious opponent. Garden pulled him by the clothes and asked, trembling, where did he lead them? They feed people to trolls. What kind of place is this? The monster growled and ran at the enemy. The troll hit the ground right in front of Damien. He growled and swung his fist, but Damien moved away from his blows. He avoided all of his blows. Then he looked at the troll and pulled out his sword, and while the monster was screaming, he cut him into 2 with his sword. All the people were shocked, and there were surprised and enthusiastic cries. Rachel was perplexed and wondered, did he cope? This guy is more monstrous than he thought. That's why he and the main character, Damien, left the battlefield. Anyone who can be compared to Javier, the strongest Grand Master swordsman in history, is a genius. The warrior was leaving the arena. Rachel told Garden to remain alert and follow him. The man replied, okay. They walked along the corridor. A shaved man asked who they were. Let them stop. But having received a gold bar, he joyfully replied that they could pass. Rachel opened the door and asked for forgiveness. Damien wiped the blood from his face and looked at him. Rachel thought that she needed to remain calm. The colon laughed and asked, was he scared? Rachel took a bottle of pills from the table and said that he was sorry. Why was he drinking such a cheap painkiller? Would he at least be able to sleep after this? The young man asked who he was. Rachel replied that he was the one the warrior needed. Damien asked if he had come to sell him medicine. The crown prince answered, something like that, and then the guy told him to leave. He already had it. He didn't have time to finish because Rachel interrupted him by asking him, is there enough medicine? Even though this is a lot, what is the use of it? He tossed the can aside. Damien picked up his sword. And when Rachel said that it would never get rid of the burning pain in the back of his head, the guy stopped. Rachel looked at him and thought that he was caught now his way out. He told him to listen carefully. The pain usually starts in the back of his brain. The muscles in the neck of his head there become rigid, tingling and aching. Does he feel tension in the back of his head and shoulders? Rachel masked the cook and asked him what kind of look he had. He was curious how he knew this. He said that when the pain becomes very acute, it spreads from the sides of the head to the forehead and even goes to the eyes. He is covered with goosebumps and sweats profusely. The eyes hurt so much that it seems as if they will pop out of their sockets. The funny thing is that this pain comes like a wave, and then subsides, after which everything repeats itself. It just drives you crazy, as if he is in hell. And when it already seems that the torture is over, it continues. But instead of relying on cheap painkillers to get rid of the source of the pain, Rachel asked if he knew that this was not a cure. Damien thought he was talking too much. Blood started pouring out of his ear. He wondered if he could kill him. Rachel said that he had a mouth. Let him say something, the pathetic fool. Damien thought he was giving him a word in edgewise and asked who he was. Rachel enthusiastically replied that he was the crown prince. Then Damien began to take out his sword, saying that it was time to finish with him. Rachel became worried and asked him to wait. He was joking. Kuzman sent him. The warrior asked again, Kuzman? Rachel said yes, his patron and intermediary with the Colosseum. He spoke about his complaint and that recently the pills have not helped. Kuzman is suffering because no one has enough ingredients for him due to the current season. Damien asked what he meant by that. Rachel spoke, smug that he had another way to relieve him of the pain, and asked what he would say now that he trusted him more. Damien asked incredulously, did he bring a new medicine? Rachel replied, no medicine will help here. We need to get rid of the source of the pain. Let him take off his clothes and lie down. He will explain everything during the treatment process. The guy calmly said, okay. He was lying on his stomach and Rachel asked, are you scared? The guy answered, of course not. There was a mark on his back. Damien added, after all, he is a warrior who has killed and wounded countless times and risked his life. Rachel answered as he said and took out a large stone. He put it on his back and asked, is this the first time he has encountered Moxibustion? Rachel held a torch in his hand and sat on a chair. Damien said that he was a warrior and such treatment would not scare him. Rachel set the top of the stone on fire with a torch, and the men standing outside the door heard screams from the room. Rachel bent over him and said sarcastically, just like that, little child, but what about him as a warrior? He grinned and asked if he was crying. He understands that it hurts, but let him hold on. The reason why Damien cannot leave the underground world lies in this mark. The curse is activated the moment the bearer's blood begins to circulate. Fierce battles in the Colosseum subject him to incredible torment to endure. He bought painkillers with money borrowed from Kuzman. To pay off the debt, he will have to participate in one more fight. Fight is the cure. Fight is the cure. A vicious circle. What a freak Kuzman is. Now Damien is affected by a huge heat that will burn through the mark. If he heals the main character of the novel and the strongest person, will he take his side? Everything will be even better if you help the other gladiators. Damien sighed and grabbed the sheet. Rachel said that the treatment was over. Let him get up. The guy stood up. The mark became paler on his back. Rachel thought it was great. It went well. He asked smugly, how did it get better, didn't it? Does it hurt anywhere else? Does he feel fresher? Damien touched his shoulder and said that this was not bad. He felt renewed. This had not happened for a long time. He smiled slightly. Rachel rubbed his nose and said that they may not speak formally anymore, but he was not completely cured yet. More cauterization. That is, procedures should be done. The gladiator asked, Really? Rachel replied, Yeah, if blisters appear on your back, it's better not to touch it, and you shouldn't overexert your body until it returns to normal. And don't eat fatty foods either. Damien asked again, Not to overexert yourself. Rachel shouted that this means no fighting. Isn't it clear? Damien said, and clenched his fist. Kuzmin would not allow it. Rachel said that he would not have to fight. He would take care of it. Damien looked at him in fascination and asked who he was. He asks to say his name. Rachel said that he was already the crown prince. There was an awkward pause and Damien said, Okay, he must have his reasons for this. Rachel thought that he had said the truth. He coughed and said that from now on he should follow his recommendations. In the evening, no matter what happens in the Colosseum, he should not run away, but simply stay here. Damien asked what. Rachel shouted that he should not dare to doubt. Just let it be safer here. He turned and said that this was the only way they could meet again. The guy remained silent and, bending one knee, said, and that he understood. Rachel went out into the corridor. Garden approached him and asked, His Highness, why did he look for him and carry out such strange treatment? This place doesn't seem safe or legal. He really doesn't understand what happened today. They walked along the corridor. Rachel replied that he would understand later. Just let him do what he should and help him. Garden asked what? Rachel replied that he should look for a man with black hair and a ponytail. He was quite large and had narrow eyes. The fans stood outside the arena. Some people sat at the bar. Garden looked around and thought tail and narrow eyes. Tail and eyes. He drew attention to one man, turned and waved his hand to Rachel, saying that it seemed he had found it. Rachel looked down and thought, He will look. A large man with long hair tied in a ponytail was sitting at the table. Rachel thought that this really fits the description. I need to check it out. He moved a chair. The man looked at him angrily and Rachel noted this evil look. He asked, Kuzmin? The man said that he didn't know him. Then Rachel said that he knew Damien and he had only one thing for him. He wanted to buy Damien Cayenne. And he asked how much he needed to pay to repay his debts for painkillers and breaking the contract. Kuzmin said, 9 trillion Majin. He won't give it up for less. Only the crown prince himself can pay that much. He laughed. Rachel smiled a little and said, Really, how lucky he is. After all, he is the crown prince. The man laughed and said that he was as much a crown prince as he was. His name, Rachel asked, is the crown prince who sells medicine? Kuzmin shouted that if he is not going to buy, let him get lost. Rachel stood up and Kuzmin thought that he had never seen him. He snapped his fingers. A man approached him. He bowed and said, Yes, sir. Kuzmin said that this skinny freak was trying to deceive him and let him find out who he is and find out whether he works at the Colosseum or whether he was hired by the organizers. He can resort to torture and interrogation, after which he will be torn into pieces and thrown into the river as usual. An hour later, the doors opened. Kuzmin jumped up and asked, What's wrong? A man entered the door and fell next to Kuzmin's table. He was battered and bleeding. Kuzmin exclaimed Dilik and asked what was wrong with him. Following this, Rachel entered the door and there were knights behind him. He took off his wig and showed the coat of arms. The knights shouted that the secret Imperial Inspector had arrived. An hour ago, Rachel was walking with Garden, who was turning his head from side to side, along the street and asked him to behave naturally so as not to expose them. The man smiled and scratched his head and said, Well, His Highness has just never been followed before. Rahul looked back and thought, he knew this would happen. As soon as Kuzmin felt the slightest threat, he would send his people to monitor whoever was bothering him. Around the corner of the building stood the man he sent. Rachel thought that's why he deliberately approached him, and wondered, how can one be so predictable? The man pulled out a knife from under his clothes. Suddenly it hit the knight's suit. He shouted that Dilik was accused of attempted murder of a member of the ruling family. In an instant, he was surrounded by a crowd of knights. And so in the bar Garden asked how the secret Imperial Inspector understood this. Rachel smiled and told him not to pay attention. He just wanted to say it at least once. They all did a good job. Rachel gave the knight the coat of arms. Kuzmin looked at them worriedly and wondered what was going on. Imperial Guard, why are they here? Rachel said that he is Crown Prince Rachel Adria Magentano orders them to raze this place to the ground. And take that man into custody, the knight said, and so His Highness rushed forward. Garden looked at this in surprise and thought that everything was going exactly according to his plan. His Highness has definitely become a completely different person. He has fixed the underground organization and is worried about their empire. Rahil stood aside and said, "The guys are real professionals. This is very cool." He thought that a huge number of additional days of life awaited him. And now, he exclaimed, "Crown Prince, where is the Crown Prince selling medicine?" Kuzmin hid around the corner and thought that if he was caught, this would be the end. He rushed forward and thought, how could he turn out to be a real crown prince, and why did he need to buy Damien? He needs to hide for a while. He will wait until everything calms down. Suddenly, the tips of swords appeared in front of him. He wondered why the knights are here. Rahul said, he sees he didn't say that Kuzmin would come here. He told Garden that he had 500 Majin. The man threw him money. He was sad. Kuzmin looked at this and wondered what was going on. Rachel approached him and asked, is he surprised? Can't understand anything, no matter how hard he thinks. He is convinced that it is important to pay for medicine and cannot stand it when people do not pay for it, both for him and for others. Kuzmin thought what kind of nonsense this was. Rachel said that that was why he asked him for the bill for Damien's painkillers and asked how much he owed. Did he really forget? In any case, he offered a fair deal. The man didn't accept it. Kuzmin's hand shook. He pulled out a knife and asked what kind of nonsense he was talking about. But he was met by the knight's fist, which broke his nose. The knight put his sword forward and said that it was better for him not to get up. Kuzmin thought, since it came to this, he had a pill in his mouth. He bit it with his teeth. He thought that in 5 seconds the capsule would explode. He builds a poisonous explosion and a huge commotion will begin. As soon as someone takes a breath, he will be paralyzed. If they are very unlucky, they will die, and he will survive, spitting out the capsule in advance. Kuzmin wondered what would happen next. He will blow off the crown prince's head and escape. This is the perfect plan. Kuzmin started counting 5, 4, 3. Suddenly, Rahul covered his mouth with his hand and said, 2. What's the matter? Does he want to spit something out? Kuzmin thought, did this freak know about his secret weapon? Rachel smiled, finished counting, saying, 1. The capsule in her mouth exploded. Paralysis began to spread. Kuzmin thought that he needed to gather his strength, but he would lose consciousness in 3 minutes. He could only survive if he took an antidote. With trembling hands, he reached under his jacket, but Rachel intercepted it, taking the bottle in his hands. He said that the man was probably dying of curiosity, how he knew everything, but he wouldn't tell. Rachel opened the jar and drank the antidote and, wiping her mouth with her hand, said that it was very bitter. Kuzmin was trembling on the floor and reaching out to the bottle. Let the freak give away his antidote. Rachel threw the bottle and said, no, he won't give it back since he poisoned him, and thought he needs to use the ability to request payment for medical treatment. The system showed Slotso 1 was 0.1 out of 10 liters full. He couldn't hold out any longer, and Kuzmin collapsed to the floor, foaming at the mouth. Rachel thought that everything was ready under the 5th thoracic vertebra about 1.5 inches on either side of the carrier's heart point. He clicked on it and the man vomited, and now the antidote. The system notified that 0.01 liter of antidote had been removed from the slot. The man screamed and passed out. The system notified a request for payment for medical treatment level 1 ability was activated. Patient Kuzmin treatment detoxification life expectancy increased 21 years and 2 months. The amount of additional life expectancy received is 381. The number is rounded. The final additional life expectancy is 4 days. The total life expectancy is 118 days. Rachel clenched his fist and exclaimed, that's it. He turned to the knight so that they would arrest him and said that now it was time to take away what he came for and return to the palace. Damien extended his sword forward in front of the knights. The man wondered why these gladiators were so strong. The knight said, they just told them to stand still. Then the crown prince came out. Damien looked at him and Rachel asked, now he believes that he is the crown prince? Damien remained silent and lowered his sword. He remembered how he stood over his mother and thought, this is how she looked on her deathbed. He dreamed of repeating that day again. The day when he was left completely alone in the whole world. But it all broke into fragments. The day when he was abandoned. Suddenly Damien heard a voice that asked him to get up. He woke up in bed. Garden and Rachel were standing next to him. Garden said to let him introduce himself officially. He is the chief physician of Crown Prince Garden. They shook hands, and the guy introduced himself holding his hand, Damien. Rachel turned and said that enough acquaintances, let him follow him. There is a lot to do today. Garden asked His Highness what he was up to again. Damien looked at them. Rachel asked if he didn't trust him. Damien looked at them silently. They were in the Moxabizian clinic. Damien asked what kind of place is this. Rachel said what? This is a treatment room. They not only rescued them from that hellish place, but they will also allow them to stay in the small palace and will be treated. One gladiator exclaimed. Why is he so kind to them? Rachel thought. It's not surprising that he was suspicious of this. He's trying out of the kindness of his heart. Most of the gladiators are in their 20s, and the oldest are about 30. If he gets rid of them from the cursed mark, he will greatly increase his life expectancy. But they will consider he'll be insane if he tells the truth. Rachel said that there is nothing free in this world. They think that he is just kind. Then they are mistaken. He is very sick, or more precisely, he has a lot of diseases. Everyone in the Empire knows about this, said one gladiator. Rachel angrily thought that he would treat him with particular ruthlessness. Rachel said that not a single doctor in the Empire was able to help him, no matter what treatment he received. He was only getting worse day by day, so he decided to independently search for treatment. Damien most likely understood what he was getting at. Damien thinks he needs them to test new treatments on them. Rachel spoke to the point. Let him tell you about his feelings after that procedure. Damien said that the nerve pain had practically disappeared. Rachel asked, is anyone concerned about the upcoming treatment? Everyone was silent. He thought that he had done a great job. Now he could carry out his plan. He said that they would begin the procedure immediately. Let them take off their shirts and lie down on the bed. After 6 days, they feel nauseous and break out in cold sweats. These are withdrawal symptoms after stopping the use of painkillers. It will be difficult to continue treatment with moxibustion. He approached Damien and asked him if he was dizzy or nauseous. Then Damien said that he was holding back the urge, and Rachel noted that it was not for nothing that he was the main character. In any case, for now he would have to change the method of treatment. Let him do it for today. He rests and drinks more water. He turned to Sergio and told him to stay in bed. He was having a really hard time with the withdrawal symptoms, right? The man tremblingly said that not at all. He was fine. Rachel replied that he didn't look well. He would help him with this. He took out a needle. Rachel thought that he honestly doubted that acupuncture would work, but since he had been taking painkillers for the longest time, naturally his symptoms were more severe. There was no better candidate to test this method. He will start from the painful point next to the stomach, and the first will be the running point. Suddenly the man screamed sharply and squeezed his throat. Rachel asked for help. Damien knocked him out with a blow to the neck with the edge of his hand and asked if His Highness was okay. He helped him up. Rachel looked at the man and thought that because of the withdrawal syndrome, the cramps appeared even after mild stimulation. His nervous system must be very sensitive now, and he feels a tiny impact as if he was pierced with a sword. To get around this, he needs thinner needles. Rachel leaned on the table in his office and reads a letter that says, His Highness, the blacksmith writes, his order to create a needle as thick as a thread can be carried out. However, he is not sure that he can make several pieces of the same thickness. It is difficult because he is not a dwarf artisan. He asks for forgiveness. Rachel put the letter aside and thought that this was annoying. He didn't have much time. The withdrawal symptoms would only get worse. What could he do? He grabbed his head. The system immediately notified that his internal organs sensed his stress. Stress is the cause of many diseases. His internal organs advise him to get rid of it. The heart said, what a pity to give a hint. Rectum said that it would be nice to hear this before the sphincter fully opens. The system asked, has he already forgotten? They were sent a guide on how to use the health points they received. Rachel wondered if he could summon monsters. The system responded by investing the received health points. He can unlock various abilities or summon monsters. Rachel thought that the novel said this. The system said he chose to summon a monster using the gacha mechanics. A powerful monster with a strong character, absolute loyalty to the owner, and allowing him to gain various abilities. Summoning first round 300 points. Number of points 500. Does he want to summon? Rachel thought that please, let it be useful and clicked yes. The system notified that the summoning begins. The remaining health points are 200. Before the selection begins, Please let him speak the ability he would like to transfer to the monster. The summoned monster will have the desired ability. Rachel loudly and enthusiastically exclaimed that he needed a lot of thin needles, even if this creature could create them in large quantities and identically. The system notified, the request was accepted, 3 boxes appeared in front of him. Above the first, it was written that this was Candidate 1 Happy Grunting Creature, Candidate 2 the creator of Steel, and Candidate 3 the Hedgehog. Rachel wondered what happened to their names. The system notified that these 3 candidates can fulfill 150% of his request. Making a choice, it is impossible to change this or points, so please let him choose carefully. Rachel said, that is, there is 1 jackpot, 1 good option, and 1 dummy. A happy grunting creature, the creator of Steel, and a hedgehog. He wondered who to choose. He thought for a very long time. His heart screamed that it was about to burst from despair. Let him just choose the hedgehog. He chose the hedgehog candidate. The box opened. Rachel prayed that he would be good. He had few health points left. In front of him was a small hedgehog. The system wrote a manual for using the hedgehog. The size can be changed if you feed it with sunflower seeds, which are included in the kit. Rachel wondered, where did this come from? Red sunflower seeds make the hedgehog huge. The duration of the form is 12 hours. Blue sunflower seeds make the hedgehog tiny. Let him give them to him when the effect of the red ones comes to an end. The hedgehog's abilities are endless thorns. Level 1. In place of a pulled-out thorn, a new one grows. Acceleration of a prickly chestnut. Level 1. The user turns into a prickly chestnut and attacks. Explosion of 3 color needles. Level 1. The user shoots a white, brown, black needle. The intensity of the pain depends on the color. Rachel said what was to be expected from a hedgehog. He attacks with needles. He asked if he could take 1 needle from him. Won't it hurt him? Rachel asked for white, brown, and black. The young man tensed and a needle stuck into Rachel's hand. He thought that the white pain was mild, just like a gladiator. The brown one looked like a sting. Rachel asked Hedgehog. He doesn't know how strong the pain from a black needle can be. Something sinister comes from this. He will try it on someone else. Now the problem with the needles is solved. Rachel said that he will be his pet. He went out to the hospital. Garden asked what kind of creature was on his shoulder. Rachel asked him to say hello. Garden asked why he needed it. He turned and said that he could check with the hedgehog for details. Garden thought, isn't he a summoned monster? 300 years ago, the brilliant builder of the Roid Fronter had a hamster, a snake, and others who helped him. Very rarely summoned monsters that appeared in this world in front of a person voluntarily agree to work for him for the rest of his life. They are extremely mysterious consciousnesses. He wondered how the prince got his hands on it. His Highness, is there something he doesn't know about? A gladiator sat in front of him. He asked for forgiveness. He committed a crime for which yesterday he should have lost his life. Rachel told him not to worry. Something like this can happen if he experiences enormous pain, but he no longer feels anything no matter how many needles he uses. The gladiator asked what, but he hadn't done anything yet. Rachel said that he had done something. The man had several needles in his hand. He laughed and thought that everything was going like clockwork. If we can continue like this, here it is. The system notified, a request for payment for medical treatment level 1. The ability was activated. Patients Damien and the other 13. Disease curse tag. The final amount of additional life expectancy gained is 80 days. Life expectancy is 171 days. The level of request for payment for medical treatment has increased due to the receipt of a large amount of additional life expectancy. The name of the ability, request for payment for medical treatment level 2. The ratio is 2000 to 1 and 1950 to 1. Rachel wondered in surprise, and the level of the ability rose. He jumped up. Damien looked at him silently and clenched his fist, thinking, this is the Crown Prince. What did they do that he's so happy? Why did their recovery make him so happy? Rachel thought, okay, that's it for now with the gladiators, but he grinned. The Emperor was drinking tea. A guy approached him, asking him to provide him with another report on the Crown Prince. 2 days ago, all 14 gladiators received the title of bodyguards of the Crown Prince. Did the Emperor ask the bodyguards again? The young man replied, that's right. Now they are called Special Imperial Guards. They are ordered to be near the Crown Prince at all times. And how does Rachel pay them? The guy replied that the contract included salary and other benefits. The emperor thought Rachel was sickly, spent days in bed, and now he has formed a personal squad of gladiators. He is becoming more and more interesting, he smiled. The young man said that he also gathered the servants and guards of the small palace together and began mercilessly piercing them with needles. The emperor looked at the guy in bewilderment. Rachel asked, "Does it hurt?" The man answered no at all. "Then why are you groaning?" "These are just needles." The man's face was covered in needles. He looked at the prince with rounded eyes. Rachel shouted, "Next!" There was a crowd of servants in his room. A few days ago, Rachel was walking in the park. He turned and asked how Damien was feeling after a couple of days of moxibustion. Damien replied that he was in a little pain. Rachel said, "It's a pity that the treatment is over." The guy asked, "Excuse me?" Rachel said that was all. He recovered. The guy asked again, "Really?" Rachel replied, "Yes, the treatment worked," and he was done with the experiments. Damien remained silent and a little later thanked him for his help by bowing, when suddenly Rachel shouted for him to wait and waved his hands. He asked to listen to him first. He needs his sword skills. He doesn't want to send him away. Such talent should not be wasted, so let him become his personal bodyguard. Rachel extended his hand and added that, of course, he was asking for this without hoping for such eccentricities as a grateful heart, friendship, or loyalty. He would make sure that he was paid adequately, that he would have enough for expenses and savings for retirement. He thought that, in fact, Damien would soon reach the level of an advanced expert and experience the Sword Master Syndrome. I'm sure he also understands this since he knows very well at what level his abilities are. Sword Master Syndrome at this level of feelings is incredibly aggravated, but it is impossible to control. He will experience even more severe insomnia than last time. He could ask him to stay under the pretext that he had not completed his treatment, but there was a high chance that he would simply leave. In the current situation, the only solution is mutual concessions. Rahul folded his hands on his chest and said that they would sign a contract and he would also be given payments for maternity leave and child care. Damien was silent. Rachel was a little embarrassed. He took it for granted. "Okay, he will let you decide when to finish the work." The guy was silent, then Rahul answered, "Well, he sees that he knows how to negotiate then a 4-day work week. How can he definitely refuse this?" Suddenly, 2 mercenaries jumped out of the bushes, shouting that please he would hire them too. Rachel asked how long have they been here. The men replied that he healed them in order to hire them. They will also take payment, or rather let him allow them to repay for his help. They will protect him when Damien is not around. He told them that he will help them become better. Rachel said so it's not about gratitude for the treatment, but about their love for money and benefits. The men answered in unison. Yes, indeed. Rachel wondered if they were too honest. Well, it's better than empty talk about loyalty and concealing anger, and it would also be nice to gather a personal army exclusively for yourself. The Imperial Guards do not belong only to him, so in the event of a conflict, the Emperor's orders will take precedence over his. Rachel shouted, "Okay, they all hired will be his personal special Imperial Guard." The men were happy. Damien smiled a little. Rachel looked at them and thought that even after healing them all, the bonus number of lives was not that great. In total, he increased his life expectancy by 100 years and only received an additional 18 days. With his weak stamina and physical strength, he cannot go out on his own to search for patients. He stood in front of the palace. Evening came. He sat on a chair and said that he needed to open a clinic in the small palace. Damien, standing next to him, asked, "What is this?" Rachel was surprised and asked, "He doesn't know what a clinic is." Damien said that he knew, but the curtain trembled and then, with tears in his eyes, he shouted His Highness. Rachel said that he scared him. The man said that he finally understood. He understood that he has a wonderful aristocratic heart. He wants to open a clinic to look after and help the sick. Rachel stood up and said that it was true, and finally his intentions became clear to him. He can't believe that he is concerned about the health of citizens despite his own illness. This is all for the sake of the city's residents. Damien stood with a stony face looking at their admiration. Rachel said that first of all he wants to cure the employees in the palace. The man asked again, in the palace? Rachel said that let's say he opens a clinic to treat people, but will they feel comfortable coming here? Since this is your palace after all, he believes that it would be awkward for them. Rachel said that this is why he needs advertising in the form of stories about successful cures, which will lure them in. Once people start passing information by word of mouth, they will start coming to him for treatment at the traditional medicine clinic in the small palace. He thought that so far he has tested 500 patients. Why are they all so healthy? For examining 500 people, he received only 2 extra days. This is bad. He needs very sick people. Suddenly an idea came to his mind. Garden put a stack of paper on the table and said that here is information about all 500 people. As he ordered, they collected data on their families' ages and illnesses. Rachel smiled and thought that since the palace employees were healthy, he would check the health of their families. He is sure there will be at least one person with a complex disease. He began to sort through the stack of paper and asked himself the question, no one at all? 10 pages left. Damien told His Highness he was disappointed. Rachel raised his head and asked again, is he disappointed? The guy said that with his permission, he would like to ask a question. Are patients a tool for him? He said that he needed good reviews, so he tried to get as many patients as possible. But now it seems he is only looking for those who are on the verge of death. Gordon asked what kind of insolence he was sure His Highness had a plan. Rachel said thank you for the protection, but Damien was not exactly wrong. Gordon was embarrassed and asked for forgiveness. His Highness is too strict. How can you embarrass a loyal subject who stood up for him? Gordon told him to listen and see if he was being too rude to His Highness. Rachel looked at it and thought, what are they doing? He asked them to go out the door. Bad thing. There were 10 sheets left. Rachel picked up another sheet of paper and read the girl's note, which said that she didn't know if it was possible to write something like that in the questionnaires, but she plucked up the courage. Her brother is 8 years old. Once or twice a month, his whole body trembles and foam comes out of his mouth like she's being held by a demon. She called several doctors to see him, but they were unable to determine the cause. The priests also prayed earnestly for him, but no matter how hard they tried to drive out the evil spirits, it did not help. Rachel exclaimed that he was found. The maid stood in front of him and said, His Highness, this child is her younger brother Jorg. Rachel squatted down and greeted him. The boy replied, hello, His Highness. The prince said that he could just call him Rachel. George not only came to the palace for the first time, but also had not seen him before. Now he is most likely more scared than curious. There is a great way to relax a young patient. Rachel reached into his pocket and held out something on his hand. There was candy. The boy's eyes shone, and he said that it was a gift. He stretched his hands towards him, but the boy was horrified. Rachel asked what was wrong. Jorg said that he shouldn't touch him. Rachel asked, will he tell you why? The boy replied that he was cursed by the spirit. Because of this, other children tease him and think that he is a weirdo. Rachel said that this is not so. He is not a weirdo. The boy replied that yesterday they teased him, offended him, and they fought. But he lost. First a strange feeling appeared, and then everything around went dark. Rachel asked again, did it darken? The boy answered yes. Sometimes out of the blue, he gets this incomprehensible feeling and his body begins to tremble. It goes numb, and it seems to him as if he is flying down and falling to the ground. The sky is moving away and a strange voice is coming from somewhere. And when he wakes up, he has no strength at all. Rachel spoke clearly. Even so, he manages to cope with it. Jorg is very brave. The boy had tears in his eyes. He said to His Highness, that is, Rachel, he really can't touch him. He is possessed by an evil spirit. Rachel replied that there are no evil spirits. It's something else. The system notified that a pulse measurement is starting. A scan is being performed. The general conclusion is that the patient is generally healthy. However, symptoms of seizures have been detected due to irregular brain waves. This can lead to serious, all-encompassing tonic seizures. Rachel thought that he was experiencing epilepsy. The problem would not have happened if, due to uncontrollable brain waves, the whole body did not begin to convulse and the patient did not lose consciousness. Rachel stood up and said, even if he is possessed, he himself is not strange at all. The boy asked, is it true? Rachel answered yes, and the crown prince is never wrong. He thought he was lucky to find out about his epilepsy, but even if he tries to cure it, now he won't be able to find the cause. It's infuriating that he doesn't have the equipment to take pictures. The boy said to His Highness, that is, Rachel. His body began to tremble. He said that something was wrong with him. Rachel wondered if he was having an attack, but why now? Garden exclaimed that he was definitely possessed by an evil spirit. His Highness demanded that he leave him. Rachel bent over the child and shouted for them to stop. This has nothing to do with an evil spirit. He is sick. Patients are people who need to be taken care of and protected. He is in pain now. Let them bring a pillow. The maid answered okay. They put the child to bed. Garden asked him if he was foaming at the mouth. Should he wipe it with a towel? Rahul said that he has never done this before. His chin muscles are now moving uncontrollably. If something goes wrong, he might bite the towel and swallow it. Now there is nothing to be done. They can only help when the attack is over. Rahul looked at him and thought, why does he feel mana emanating from him? This Asrahan core technique is very sensitive to the flow of mana. Mana is in fact circulating energy. If he can see this, he will be able to determine the cause of epilepsy. He touched the child and thought that he sees this flow of mana everywhere. It is heading where he wants. He needs to focus. Such a chance does not come often. He must find the reason. He thinks that the matter is in the cranial nerve originating in the brainstem. It's too early to get tired. He hasn't found any information yet. A little more of the vagus nerve. The point is that an incorrect signal appears in it, causing an attack in the brain and the whole body. He turned to the maid so that she would bring a blanket and cover him. He now needs rest. Let them not wake him up. Just let him sleep and don't make noise. There's no need to make a commotion. After these words, Rachel fell to the ground. Oh my God, he lost consciousness. Is His Highness okay? Rachel thought what a relief he had found the cause, and now he could cure him. It was night outside when Rachel opened his eyes and thought that he had a headache. He lost consciousness. It seems that the Astrakhan core technique opened to its maximum while he was unconscious. Damien said that he woke up. Rachel was scared. The guy said that he slept for half a day. Rachel asked how the boy was, and Damien replied that Jorg woke up in the evening but was exhausted. Rachel replied that it was normal because he had a serious attack. Damien replied that after dinner he immediately fell asleep. Rahul thought that he knew it might work out this way, but he did not expect to carry out such an ideal diagnosis using the Astrakhan nucleus technique, which is much better than X-rays and MRI. Now that it has become clear that the cause is the vagus nerves, there is only one way to cure it. You need to use nerve stimulation. Damien asked His Highness where he was going in the middle of the night. Rachel put on his outer clothing and exclaimed under the lightning strike. The guard shouted, "Who's coming?" Rachel thanked them for their work and let them please see him off in peace for Mr. Xanatas. They walked through the palace and came to the door. A man with long white hair asked His Highness what brought him here. It was the palace magician, Mr. Xanatas. Rachel asked him for forgiveness for the sudden visit, but he has a request. Let him please hit him in the back with lightning magic. The man was dumbfounded. A day earlier, the emperor told the magician that he was doing strange things. In fact, everything he could. He began to worry about what would come into his head again. All people act stupid when it comes to their children. He has served him all his life and knows what he is thinking. His Majesty, he has clearly changed a lot and become even more insane. The old man asked why harm him. If something happens to him, he is a non-resident. Rachel told him to wait. You don't need to kill him. A little electricity won't harm him. He will need to inject it into his body for 3 hours without a break. Lightning magic, by its nature, is extremely destructive. A high-ranking magician can use this to compete with a natural disaster. He asks him to produce low-voltage electricity for 3 hours. To do this, you need to have excellent control. The man asked His Highness, does he know that his requests are incredibly difficult to fulfill? It would be like driving a car at a speed of 30 km/h for more than 3 hours. Rachel said that that's why he came to him. Who else knows how to control Manhua so well? He is the best in the empire. The man was embarrassed. He is not so against the idea of participating in this test. But His Highness, suddenly Rachel interrupted him and said that if something happens to him, let him not worry. He will not hold him accountable. He will not be obliged to account for his injuries or for death, and they will witness it. The men were scared and thought that they shouldn't be dragged into this. Rachel said that she was not planning anything bad. She just wanted to help someone. The magician said, well, since this is the case, let's try it. He asked when they would start, and Rachel exclaimed right now. The man thought that he could not thoughtlessly use electricity on a child. First, he needed to try everything on himself and make sure that it was safe. He asked His Highness ready. So they begin. Rachel thought great. He knew that the palace magician would handle it. Now it was his turn. He would absorb the electric current and convert it into an electrode and then introduce electrical signals directly into the abnormal nerve impulse appearing in the boy's vagus nerve, thereby taking control of it. Asraken's core technique is too strong. He didn't expect to succeed the first time. He turned to the man and said that this was enough. The magician asked if he wanted him to stop, if he could continue for the whole day. Rachel shouted that it hurt him. He said enough is enough. The servant stood in front of the doors, wondering why he gathered so many people again. Was he planning something again? The girl said that she heard he calls those who like to spread rumors. She doesn't understand him at all. Rachel sat in front of the boy by the bed. He said that he would not ask him to relax. Medicine was harsh, and the procedures were painful, but honest. Jorg asked, "Will it hurt a lot?" Rachel responded a little like a mosquito bite. The boy said it means it hurts. He didn't even notice that he had already inserted the needle. Although from now on it will tingle, okay? The electricity is gathering gradually. Let them watch carefully and tell everyone about this revolutionary treatment. That's what viral marketing is. Now we need to process the electric current. He looked and thought that it was something sinister. He screwed up. The flow of mana is moving unsteadily. The attack is about to happen. Jorg asked how much longer he needs to endure like this. Rachel thought that there was a maximum of 3 minutes before the attack, and in the worst case scenario, 1 minute. He needs to set the opposite signal in this electrode. It's bad. It's a matter of little time. Even if you activate the Astrakan core technique at full power, the process will still take half an hour. Is it worth stopping and trying another different question? But if an attack happens, the servant will blab about it to the others. He doesn't know how long Mr. Dzanides will agree to help him, and is not sure that the chance will arise again. A terminally ill person like him has no time for weakness. He said, "Mr. Dzanides, please let him increase the power of magic 3 times. The magician asked, "Excuse me." Rachel demanded that he do it. He will explain later. The magician said that it would hurt him, but the prince replied that it did not matter. The magician increased the flow of magic to start the attack. 10 seconds left. You need to absorb more mana, process this, and complete the treatment. The electrode must be placed on the carotid artery. 5 seconds before the attack. The boy began to foam at the mouth. Time remained 3, 2, 1. 0 seconds remained. The boy felt better. He looked at the prince and asked Rachel. The prince asked, "Does he feel better?" The servant girl exclaimed, "Nothing happened." Usually he loses consciousness when the pain begins, and yet what a relief he was on the verge. His body is still numb. System notification request for payment for medical treatment level 2 activated patient Jorg treatment surgery to stimulate the vagus nerve. Total amount of additional life received 3 days life expectancy 161 days. Rahul looked at this and thought great. He had earned extra days, and the system notified that he had maximized the use of the Archan core technique to withstand the intense stimulation of his body. In the process, he had exceeded his limit. The level of Asrakan's core technique has been increased. Mana increase is 130%. The required indicators for the next increase are needed 200 health points. Current health points are 200. Rahul clenched his fist and thought that the core technique has been pumped up and the mana increase has increased. The system notified him to successfully carry out stimulation with powerful electricity, thanks to which the energy of gold in his lungs and colon was activated and acted on the energy of the tree since the metal limits the tree. The organ that has the energy of the tree, the liver, awakened. Liver opened the door and exclaimed that the sloths should take his things. The heart asked, "Is he a newbie?" Colon took off his t-shirt and said that he was no longer a newbie. The liver looked at him and slapped him in the face, asking him, he's trying to write him down as a beginner. Has he already decided what his last words will be? The system window notified that the liver gave him 300 health points. His lungs, heart, and colon were very happy to replenish and gave him another 500 health points. The liver birthday party begins. He received an additional 300 health points. The current points are 1 and 300. Rachel wondered, new body. Now he will be able to get even more health points. What a wonderful day. He upgraded the Asarkan core technique, awakened the liver, and received additional health points. Perhaps they will give him something else. The system wrote that that was all. Jorg called out to him, saying that something was wrong with him. Rachel leaned over him and said that everything was so. The boy said that usually when he has a strange feeling after his eyes darken, he loses control over himself. Rachel asked, was he surprised? Was it different this time? He said that from now on, it will be like this until the end of his life. Jorg asked honestly. Rachel said yes, he will no longer suffer from pain. If he is lying, then tomorrow he will cease to be the crown prince. The maid, his sister, began to cry. The boy saw her and they hugged. Rachel looked at them and thought that this was a complete success. He looked at the servants. Everyone saw everything. Now it's time to spread the news about his good deed. It's time to receive patients in the palace. He will treat them and get tons of extra days of life. A long and healthy life awaits him. Suddenly his eyes darkened. He asked, is he losing consciousness again? The system notified, of course, after such stress that his body experienced. Rachel was lying on the bed. He opened his eyes and thought how long had he been unconscious. Garden asked His Highness, has he woken up? Rachel asked why they were watching him sleep. Didn't they have anything else to do? Garden said that he was very tired of watching him sleep, and therefore hoped that he would wake up soon. He prayed so hard. Rachel asked what's wrong. Why is he crying again? Demian, he said that he slept for 2 whole days. The magician said to His Highness, did he try to kill him? How was he supposed to explain to His Majesty that he had lost consciousness due to his lightning magic? Rachel grinned and asked for forgiveness, asking what happened to Jorg. How was he? The boy looked out and said that he was fine. He laughed. Rachel asked what he was doing here. He said that he was bothering Garden until he let him in here. He wanted to give it to him when he woke up. He handed him a wooden necklace. Rachel asked did he do it while he was sleeping. Oh, this is unnecessary. He saved him only because he wanted to live longer. He shouldn't have been impressed by his action. Jorg said that he also wants to become great and help people like him. Rachel was surprised and said that the pendant was well made. He thanked the child. But for him the best reward is to see him healthy again, Jorg. He needs to rest a little more. The men said that then they would go and let His Highness regain his strength. The boy waved to him and said that they would see each other again. Rachel waved back and said see you later. The door closed. He looked at the necklace and asked who would wear this. Without the stones, it looks completely simple. It's time to sleep. He lay down on the bed and had a necklace on his neck. The voice exclaimed that he was home. The woman looked out and asked why he came today. The young man said that he was on vacation. Special leave. The woman asked the crown prince suddenly gave him 5 days of rest. And he said yes, and to many others from the small palace too. The man asked how the crown prince was doing. The young man replied that in his opinion, it had become much better. I wonder if that's why he's been acting strange lately. The man asked what he meant. The young man replied that he always talks about how he wants to heal other people. Let them take a look. He took out a scroll. The 3 of them bent over it. Suddenly the wind blew and the scroll flew out the window. A lot of papers were flying around the city. People were asking what it was. The flyer said, congratulations, opening ceremony of the traditional medicine clinic in the small palace, free treatment festival, spondyloarthritis, Tuina massage, acupuncture, orthodontic treatment, weight loss. Director Crown Prince Rachel Adria Magentano, specialist chief physician of the Palace Puro Garden. Any disease is normal. Open all year round. Someone asked, is he suggesting straightening the spine? At this time, in the residence, Rachel stood at the window with folded hands and said that it seemed that the rumor had spread. Garden entered the room and said it was time for His Highness to leave. Rachel turned his head and replied, well, they are coming. The men walked along the corridor. Garden noted that the crown prince slept quite a bit. He replied that today was the first day of the clinic's work. Garden informed that he bought all the medical ingredients as he asked. Rachel asked again, even licorice? Garden said that he chose this with extreme care. Rachel praised him, saying that he was great. He would need a large supply, so let him buy as much as possible, even if it causes rush demand. Garden said that he understood him. His Highness. Rachel turned around and thought. Garden apologized for the question and asked where he learned all this. Rachel asked again, everything? Garden said he meant making new concoctions and relieving joint pain by piercing with thorns. He's really curious about how I'll get it. Rachel said nothing. The man said, to be honest, he hasn't been sleeping well in recent days. He's been occupied with medical equipment that he got from nowhere. but he just can't figure out the principle of operation, no matter how hard he tries. The man hunched over and added, so he was a little sad. Rachel thought, it's sad. It means he probably feels pathetic if he can't figure out the principle of its operation. He understands his feelings, because he is also a doctor. Rachel paused and said that in fact he came from another world. The man questioningly asked for forgiveness. Rachel added that there he was not a prince, but a simple man named Lai Han, and he made his living using traditional medical techniques that he uses now. Garden asked, His Highness? It took him a long time to think about sharing with him. Rachel scratched his head and exclaimed, That's why he revealed the truth to him. Garden replied that if this was true, he would be upset, and asked if he could still be honest. Rachel answered, he was, and why should he understand all this? Garden confidently answered that he wanted to become a better doctor. He clenched his fist and added, to have the same pleasure as he did. Rachel answered, this is already available to him. The man asked for forgiveness interrogatively. Rachel turned and said, it's time for them to get down to business. He thought that he managed to get this far because he was always there and helped him. He hopes that on the opening day patients will fly to them and not just flies. If only people weren't afraid to come here because the Crown Prince lives here. It was as if he had a post-traumatic disorder. He bit his finger and prayed that there would be many patients there. Rachel joyfully opened the doors and exclaimed, Welcome to the traditional medicine clinic. In the small palace, in front of the entrance to the palace, it was empty. Rachel was horrified and said that he was cursed. He was holding onto the railing of the stairs and trembling. Garden looked at him worriedly. He turned. His Highness. Rachel exhaled and asked why. Garden asked him to look. The Crown Prince turned his head and saw. He thought that he was saved. A crowd of people was in front of him. They asked him to stand in line and not jostle. One of the men asked what he was talking about. He was the first to arrive. Rachel thought that the first day was the busiest. He asked to be allowed to measure the pulse of a small man. A servant standing next to him said, His Highness, he asks for forgiveness for distracting him, and asked what he should do. Rachel turned to him and told him to go around everyone and see if anyone needed emergency help. He exclaimed, This medicine is not prepared like that. Rachel thought that the care system still needed to be established. It would take some time before they learned to work. The system notified that he had gained enough experience from treating many patients. Taking his experience as a basis, the level of his ability to measure pulse increased. Pulse measurement level 2, palpating the target. He assesses the patient's health status. He can get the result by checking the full medical examination report. He can get more information about the symptoms of the patient's internal organs if he stays on his own. Rachel wondered what. Internal organs are involved in the process of measuring the pulse point. Heart said, let the guys get ready for a blind date. The lungs said that they were excited. The heart responded. He had already said that they were not interested in those who were 4 years older or younger. It grinned. The colon said that blind dates are cool. The liver asked to pull themselves together. They are going to meet their grandfathers. The system notified that a consultation with internal authorities had been carried out. Heart, he was examined. His heart was fine. The lungs are without abnormalities. The large intestine is slightly constipated. The rest is normal. The old man's liver showed signs of hepatitis. He needs to stop drinking. Rachel wondered what hepatitis was. Is his liver in very bad condition? The system notified, the liver is almost crying. For the last 50 years, it has been destroyed by alcohol at this rate. It will definitely give up in 5 years. Rachel thought that the detailed consultation with the internal organs was amazing. Making an accurate diagnosis is the most important part of treatment. You need to awaken other internal organs as soon as possible. Rachel said, Mister, his liver is in bad condition. The man asked what he means. Rachel replied that this was the reason for his tired appearance and yellowish complexion. His liver needed rest. He will sign him a decoction. Please let him take it for 10 days. Depending on subsequent diagnoses, he may also recommend cinnamon and poria pills. Also, the Crown Prince's face became serious. He should stop drinking. The man exclaimed, What? Rachel replied that his liver was in terrible condition. If he continued in the same spirit, he would not last more than 5 years. The man wanted to object, but Rachel interrupted him by asking, Can't he eat without drinking? He said. not as a doctor, but as a crown prince. He orders him to stop drinking. If he violates the order, he will go to prison. Rachel exclaimed, "That's all for today. Let everyone whose condition is not critical return tomorrow." One of the servants said, "His Highness did a good job." Another maid asked forgiveness for the mistake with the medicine. She is not sure if they are coping. Section replied that they should not worry. They are all great. Let them continue to work. He thought that since there was no nursing position in this world, nothing could be done. He will be in a difficult position if he sees too many patients who need the help of nurses. We need to establish a care system so that patients are cared for around the clock. If only Miss Kim and Miss Lee were here now. Suddenly the stomping of feet was heard. Garden opened the door and shouted, "His Highness, the man needs urgent help." Yes, there stood a red-haired man who said, "He is the eldest son of the House of Dinrier. It is an honor for him to meet His Highness. He asks to save his mother." The woman was laid on the bed. Rachel asked. Her fever was frighteningly strong. How long had she been in this state? The man replied, "From the beginning of the day. Before that everything was fine with her, and then she became cold and her condition gradually worsened." Rachel took the woman's hand and touched the palm with 2 fingers. He thought, "This is the disease that Napoleon's 40,000 soldiers received." Epidemic typhus is a fatal acute febrile illness caused by infection with Rickettsia bacteria. He wondered, is the liver serious? The system notified that the liver saw these bacteria in the blood that entered the woman's liver. Rachel paused and then asked when was the last time she took a bath. The man asked again, "What? Excuse me." Rachel said that he needed to know in order to better understand what condition she was in. The man answered, "Yesterday, among other things." Rachel asked, "Among other things?" The man replied, "Yes, she takes a warm bath every day." Rachel thought, it's strange that someone who washes herself every day is infected with Rickettsia bacteria. He asked what about her house, especially her bed? The man replied, "There is order and frequency everywhere." Rachel asked, "Are there any lice or fleas?" The man answered no. Then the crown prince asked, "Has she recently been to places where she could have picked it up?" The man thought. Suddenly he exclaimed, "There was, about half a month ago, her carriage broke down on the way to visit relatives, and she spent the night in a farmer's house. They allowed her to sleep on their bed. Rachel thought that the fever started today, and she was in the farmer's house half a month ago. The incubation period is 15 days. The symptoms perfectly match those characteristic of typhus." Rachel turned her head to the man and concluded that that's where she got infected. The man asked in surprise, "Are you infected?" Rachel answered that her disease was swine typhus, which is transmitted through lice that bite a person's skin and drink blood. Rachel thought that this was very bad. She was already old, and the fever was quite strong. In the worst case, she may develop pneumonia, damage the central nervous system, or necrosis of body parts. Rachel tensed and told the maids to listen carefully. Let them take off all their clothes and wash them thoroughly with towels soaked in warm water. Then dressed in hospital clothes. One of the maids raised her hand and asked what to do with her clothes. Rachel replied, "Let them burn it like the bed on which she is now lying. When they are finished, let them take a bath and burn their clothes. If they do not follow even one instruction, they will be immediately fired and will receive punishment." The girls said with horror on their faces that they understood. Rachel turned to the man, telling him to send someone to report to her family about what had happened. He waved his hand and shouted for them to do it. They shouted, just like His Highness. They rushed to the exit. Rachel stood in the kitchen and thought that the cure for her illness was tonic chicken root soup. This is great for feverish diseases, and there was a bowl of decoction in front of him. Chicken root tonic soup is an analgesic that reduces the symptoms of fever, prepared from ephedra and kudzu root. Rachel sat by the bed of a sick woman, and after greeting her, he handed her a spoon of soup, saying, "This medicine will help. Please let her drink slowly." Then the maid wiped the sweat from the woman's forehead, and at night another maid gave her soup. The next morning they covered her with a blanket. The woman did not look good. Rachel looked at her and thought, for 3 days they took care of her. 3 maids worked 18-hour shifts. But she did not feel better. Her condition only worsened due to the intense heat, in which case just one soup would not be enough. The balance of yin and yang is completely disrupted, resulting in the fulfillment of yin energy. First, The balance needs to be established before the soup can have a positive effect on her body. You will need a special medicinal herb with powerful yin energy. Let the idiots think. His internal organs grinned, but there was no brain here. These freaks are completely useless in emergency situations. But he definitely remembered one place. Rachel shouted to Garden to get the carriage ready. The palace's secret vault contains all kinds of rare treasures and artifacts. He is not sure, but it is most likely to find suitable herbs there. Only the Emperor can enter there, and it is extremely difficult to gain access. But he is the crown prince. He should take the opportunity and ask his father for help. Damien stood outside the door. Emperor Estelian and the man behind him were in a cramped office. Rachel, bending his knee, said that he was Crown Prince Rachel Adria Magentano, expressing his respect to the true ruler of the empire. The emperor asked why he came at such a late hour. Rachel thought that fashion pressure was coming from him as always. He said that the reason for his coming was that he wanted to ask to be allowed to enter the secret vault. Estelian asked why. Rachel exhaled and said that the emperor must have heard that he founded a traditional medicine clinic in the small palace. Many patients come there and he treats them. 3 days ago, a seriously ill aristocrat was brought to him. Estelian asked, "What does this have to do with the vault?" The crown prince said that this may contain the ingredients necessary for her treatment. Estelian said that he was not sure if he was telling the truth. Perhaps he wants to use the plight of an innocent patient to enter the vault for his own selfish reasons. He thought it was interesting that his son turned to him first. He had changed. Rachel thought, the old man is clearly enjoying himself now. It looks like he is deliberately making things difficult. He got angry, but he is also a middle-aged man who has experienced ups and downs. It was just as difficult to convince his father. He shouted that they didn't have time for this. The patient's life is already hanging by a thread. Estelian narrowed his eyes and asked, "Where is the evidence that his diagnosis is correct?" After all, he was sick all his youth and studied little, and now he took up medicine. His doubts are not groundless. The man shouted, he is not sure whether he is taking good enough care of the patient and whether his diagnosis can be trusted. Rachel said, "Clearly he wants to test him, right?" The man smiled slightly, looking at the developed crown prince, and answered, "Yes. It's simple. The commander of the Imperial Knights, Roberto, has recently fallen ill, and he needs to be diagnosed." The man standing nearby was surprised. Estelian added that if he could, he would allow him to enter the secret vault. Rachel touched Roberto's pulse. The emperor thought that he would never cope. Only the commander, his wife, and he himself knew about the illness. Rachel spoke. The commander suffers from baldness. The men opened their mouths in surprise, and silence fell. Estelian shouted to take off his eyes. His hair was in place and even shiny. Roberto trembled. Rachel replied, "It's just that he wears a wig," and tore it off the man's head. Roberto had tears in his eyes and mentally asked these terrible father and son to stop. The man sat on the floor and cried. The emperor stood up from the table, while Rachel opened the doors and said, "Damien, it's time to go." They were walking down the corridor when Damien asked if he had treated him too harshly. Rachel put his hands behind his head and answered, whistling, "Everything is fine. He will heal him. But for now, he needs to concentrate on something else." They stopped, and the prince said, "Here is the secret vault." Meanwhile, Roberto asked, crying, why he didn't ask his son how he could cure it. The emperor replied, "It's okay to go to the small palace and get treatment." 2 night guards stood at the door. One of them said, "His Highness." He handed him the pass with a request to take it. Rachel asked why. The man replied that he must have this with him in order to enter. Rachel asked, "What will happen if he doesn't take it?" The knight replied that then all the protective magic in the vault would be activated, and he should also give him a record of how long he was allowed to stay there. If he delayed, he would die. They remained silent. The knight said for their information, they were allowed to be in the vault until dawn. Rachel exclaimed, "What? There are only a couple of hours left before dawn." He ran to the door saying Damien needs to go quickly. The knight extended his hand, exclaiming in concern, "His Highness, this is an advanced level zone." There were 3 doors, advanced, intermediate, and basic. Rachel asked for forgiveness and scratched his head, and he tensed and thought that the knight had not fallen for it. He remembered the emperor telling him that since he had passed the test, he would allow him to enter the base level area that night. He could take 1 item there. Rachel asked in disappointment. What? Astellion asked if he had any objections to his permission. The prince said, this is not exactly permission. After all, he worked so hard and passed the test, and the emperor allowed him only to the basic level. Astellion said, it's not to say that he worked hard, and besides, he didn't say in advance what level he was applying for. Rachel replied that the emperor played everything in his own way when he passed the test. Astellion wondered if his son had any shame at all. Rachel thought that the emperor was stingy. Did he even want to help him? It's better not to contact him until you absolutely need it. Rachel leaned the pass against the device next to the door. It glowed green. The door began to open. The knight put his hand to his temple and said, see you soon, His Highness. They went inside. Rachel looked around and said that there was work here for the whole night. He turned to Damien, saying that they needed to find a suitable item here. Damien asked how to do this. Rachel exclaimed that it would be cold. Damien asked what? The prince replied that it was either an object or a reagent, or a magic ball with the attribute of ice or something similar. If he finds such a thing, let him write down the location. He will come back later. He handed him a paper and a pen, saying that they were dividing the territory in two and would check each section. He would go in that direction. And he's in that one. Damien replied, okay. Time passed. They looked at the shelves and artifacts lying on it. Rachel thought, the interesting thing is that this is a base level zone. He sees nothing suitable. The prince put his hand to his chin. He hopes that things are going better for Damien. Meanwhile, he was looking at something. They met and Rachel asked, did he write down the location as he asked? Damien answered yes and handed him the piece of paper. Rachel looked at it and wondered what it says. They walked between the shelves. The prince said, in this vast territory there is nothing with the attribute of ice. Damien replied, yes. Rachel asked, is this their last hope? You need to look at the gender as an attribute. The name is 10,000 Snow. The type of shield, the origin is unknown. The level is basic. Description. When mana is injected into this, the core in the center changes this and creates an ice shield. Rachel asked again, 10,000 Snow? It looks like a pager button that they give out in a cafe. However, he touched the shield and noted that it was cold. Ice shields are created when mana is injected into it. He took the attribute and began to enter mana, wondering, wait, maybe this is really a certain button that someone brought from a cafe? He really wants to go pick up his order. This buzzes the more mana he introduces, so you shouldn't do this thoughtlessly. The shield requires a minimum of mana to appear, which is why it was placed at the base level. He'll try again slower. It's like he's changing the temperature of the shower water. Yes, the feeling is the same. He will continue in the same spirit. Everything was covered with ice and frost. Rachel looked at it enthusiastically and exclaimed, it worked! The shield is so huge but weighs nothing at all, and is also cold. This should help. It will be able to heal that woman from the house of Dinrir. He turned to Damien saying that he would need his help again. Damien looked at him and thought that he had no idea what he was thinking about, and asked what. Rahul replied that he would say later, it's time for him to earn extra health points. Damien asked, extra health points? Rachel hesitated, saying that he meant to cure the patient. They went out and the knight asked, His Highness, what did he choose? Damien stood in front of him, embarrassed, with a pass around his neck. The knight looked at the guy and asked, is this sword? Suddenly a voice shouted, Damien, what is he doing? It was Rachel who said that he was completely disappointed in him. He was all dressed up in jewelry, a cloak and a crown. The knight said that he should also take off everything he had collected, His Highness. Garden woke up from inarticulate muttering. He looked out the window and saw Rachel and Damien, and said His Highness returned. He smiled a little and thought, Rachel was together with Damien. He used to think Damien was a rude and tough person, but he is doing a great job with me in protecting the prince. It's so good that His Highness, who has been ill all his life, has now found a friend with whom he feels comfortable. He can begin to trust him a little. Garden poured tea and went out into the corridor with a tray in his hands. Dawn came. Garden wondered what it was. Why did Damien take out the sword? Suddenly the gladiator rushed at the prince. Striking with his sword, Garden dropped the tray with tea. And he grabbed his face with his hands, shouting, he is a traitor. Rachel folded her arms across her chest and told Damien to listen carefully to what he was saying. The gladiator replied, "Yes, His Highness." He thought that his pure heart was sincerely trying to help patients in need, so he would happily and without hesitation follow his instructions. Rachel smiled and folded his hands and said, "In that case, can he hit him with the sword?" Damien tensed and wondered if he was really out of his mind. Rachel asked to beat him until the ice shield falls apart. Damien asked again, "Is he serious?" The prince exclaimed, "Yes." Damien's respect for Rachel fell. The gladiator asked why him. Does he want to kill him by making him out to be a traitor? Rachel replied that he needed to hit his shield so that he could save Mrs. Dinrier. That's the only way they could survive, both he and the prince. Damien wondered what he was talking about. He demanded a better explanation. The prince said that he saw what was written about 10,000 years of snow in the secret vault. Damien asked what does this have to do with him hitting him. He is going to use the fragment of cold that will fall out after the destruction of the shield for medical purposes. Damien asked if he could just put it on the ground. Rachel shook his head and said that this was impossible. Now he sees it, but now he doesn't, so that the shield needs to be brought in by Manhua. He himself would have liked to have resorted to a safer method. Tears were in the prince's eyes. Damien asked, "So he's asking to break the shield without harming him, right?" Rachel replied, "Yes, it is." Damien said, "His Highness could take this for treason," and asked what he should do. He will never agree without payment. Let him give him a bonus for every hit. First rule of salary discussion, strike first to win. Rachel smiled and asked, "So he wants to get paid, and what will beat him?" Damien put his hand to his heart and answered, "Yes, His Highness. He considers him his benefactor, and respects his gratuitous help to other people. But this is a different matter, so he must get paid for it." Rachel thought, well, all the misfortunes in Damien's life cannot be reduced to a lack of money. Even in the novel, he was surprisingly quite poor. Rachel said that it was the same as described in the book. He bought it and laughed. Damien asked where the prince read about him. He replied that he knew everything, but in reality he turned out to be much more shameless. The gladiator looked at him questioningly. The sun rose. Rachel created a shield of mana. Damien pulled out his sword and replied that he hoped the money would come in time. Garden fell to the ground from such a sight and lost consciousness. The dust cleared, and Damien's sword struck a deep mark in the ground. Rachel trembled, but the shield was still not broken. Damien said, "It looks like this amount of force won't break him. He'll try again." The guy swung. Rachel closed his eyes and trembled. Damien said that he had not swung yet. The prince replied, "Hurry up." Damien said okay and threw himself at the shield. He struck again and again. Rachel trembled, but the shield was not broken and Damien wondered whether to hit harder. Rachel angrily asked, "Is he trying to earn more money?" Damien concentrated and spoke. This time he will be serious. He rushed at the enemy. The impact of the sword caused cracks to appear on the shield, and it shattered into pieces. Rachel looked at this joyfully. He spun and raised his hands up and exclaimed, "It worked. He did it. Long live the long and painless life of a rich member of the ruling family." He turned to Damien, offering to collect the fragments and leave. Suddenly noticed Garden lying on the ground without a doubt, and asked why he was sleeping on the street. Kudzu, ephedra, jujube seeds, peony and licorice roots, and also ginger roots, Chinese cinnamon bark. It turned out to be an ordinary tonic soup from kudzu root. Rachel stood over the bubbling pan and thought that he would add fragments of cold and place everything in the slot. The system notified that his experience had increased significantly due to the use of the new method. A new ability, Tonic Brew, has been unlocked. The tonic decoctions he prepares will be 10% more effective than regular ones. By analyzing the ingredients, he can find out detailed information about the effectiveness of the tonic, side effects, and toxicity levels. He looked at the bowl of ice, the system notifying him that he had created a new recipe based on the traditional tonic kudzu root soup. The heart in the shape of a waiter said, smiling, "The greatest, Rachel. Here is the kudzu root tonic that he ordered. Icy kudzu root tonic soup. Tonic infusion ability option. Ingredient analysis. Does he want to activate? Yes or no?" Rachel thought it was amazing. Of course, yes. Ice tonic from kudzu root. Description is a closely brown liquid. The effect restores the energy of water and reduces fever. Directions for use. Take 3 times a day after meals. Note: Patients with a sore throat or a history of a heart attack cannot use this. Manufactured by Rachel Adria Magentano. He thought how powerful the ability is. He no longer needs to test the medicine himself. He wondered if it also restores the energy of water. Mrs. Dinrier, now he can save her. Rachel entered the room holding a tray of broth. The man exclaimed, "His Highness." Rachel asked how she was. The man replied that he was still lying exhausted. Rachel looked at the woman and thought, her energy level had dropped even more. He hoped that the medicine would work. Rachel scooped up the medicine with a spoon and said, "So let the lady drink this." "It's a little cold." He brought the spoon to his mouth. She said how bitter it was. Rachel laughed and said that the more bitter the medicine is, the more effective it is. Rachel sat in front of people and explained something to them. At night, he sat at the woman's bedside. In the morning, he prepared a tonic, and 10 days later, the servants with tears in their eyes thought, "They cannot believe that His Highness himself created the medicine and gave it to the patient." Has he always been like this? Before them is a completely different person than the former sensitive idiot. The servant thought that now he respected His Highness very much. He had always believed in him. They looked at him with intensity, while Rachel was exhausted, and thought that he somehow managed to cope, but he was very exhausted. He himself carried out examinations, care procedures, and prepared medicine. He needs to hold out for the sake of the reward. He's already there. The system reported that he had used iced kudzu root tonic and successfully cured typhus, his tireless concern for his patient's condition demonstrating exemplary self-sacrifice. Those who watch him respect and appreciate him greatly. They applaud him. In addition to the healing reward, he received a bonus complement effect. The efficiency of the ability to request payment for medical treatment level 2 has increased by 1.5 times. Rachel was surprised. What? Bonus for a compliment. Has the effectiveness of his ability increased by 1.5 times? This means that the system notified that the life expectancy of the patient, Mrs. Dinrier, has increased 27 years and 3 months. The amount of bonus life received is 503 days before the bonus effect of the complement is accrued. The bonus life amount will be rounded. The total amount of bonus life received is 8 days. The updated life expectancy is 146 days. Rachel thought it was amazing. If people around him respected and praised him, then he could earn more bonus life. He laughed. He would confuse them all more.